At number 10, we have Apocalypse. One of Earth's very first mutants, this immortal threat blurs the line between man and deity. Originally called En-Sabah-Nur, which translates either to the morning light or the seven lights, he was born in ancient Egypt, and after being abandoned by his tribe at birth on account of his monstrous physique, he was found and raised by a ruthless nomadic warrior tribe where he learned the principle that would guide him for the rest of eternity: that only the toughest, most ruthless and pitiless few would and should survive. And thanks to his mutant immortality, which comes from his ability to alter his own molecular structure at will, Nur was able to integrate his body with celestial technology over the eons, which basically uncaps his power level by allowing him to spontaneously bestow upon himself any superpower of his choosing whenever he wants, thus cementing Apocalypse as one of the most powerful ancient villains in comic history. And by the way, if you're digging the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. If you haven't done those things already, I'd really appreciate it if you did, because it helps me out. Thanks guys. At number 9, we have Circe the Weaver. Immortal witch and longtime enemy of the Amazons of Paradise Island, Circe is probably best known mythologically speaking as she who transforms people into animal hybrids, which she calls her Ani-Men. Though she sports a wide variety of many other magical abilities, a lot of which we won't be getting into today as they're all pretty typical for magic wielders, but I will mention her chronokinetic ability, allowing her to freeze temporal reality and pull herself and others out of the moment, a supremely useful and powerful ability. Alright, so how does one go about acquiring mastery over this awesome magic? Gods, naturally. See, Circe was once the princess of Colus, and after being wedded off to the heir of one of the wealthiest kingdoms in the land, she discovered that the dude was a brute, a drunk, and a liar. Arranged marriages, am I right? Anyways, she eventually capped him, which led to her being hunted by the dude's family until one day, lost and in exile, she was approached by the goddess Hecate, which bestowed upon her the Circle of the Witch Mark, representing 1/5 of Hecate's immortal soul, thus granting Circe mastery of magic by which she could fulfill her desires of dominance and revenge, and so began the legend of Circe the Weaver. At number 8, we have Kulan Gath. The sorcerer who would become Kulan Gath was once a young slave purchased by the original Kulan Gath, who was a sorcerer from the cruel kingdom of Stygia during the Hyborian era. Eventually, after withstanding years of abuse from his master, the boy ended up believing that Kulan intended to slay him, and so he decided to act first, if you catch my drift, by poisoning the mage and feeding his body to the pigs. The boy then took possession of the fallen sorcerer's magic library, and after mastering the magic, he went on to make the Kulan Gath name infamous for centuries to come. The mage would then go on to gruesomely defeat Murky Ra, the sorcerer supreme of his time, so you know we're dealing with some powerful magic here. Kulan's been slain and revived almost too many times to count, thus enabling him to persist across millennia. At number 7, we have Hela. As the Asgardian goddess of the unalived, and with strength considerably greater than most Asgardians and even matching that of Thor, Hela is undeniably one of the most dangerous ancient villains on this list. Fans of the MCU's Ragnarok will recognize her as Odin's daughter, but the comics actually allude to her being the daughter of Loki, Asgardian god of mischief. And even though the Nords warned Odin that Hela would prove to be a great threat to Asgard, Odin decides to make Hela goddess and ruler of the spirits of the unalive, as if that's gonna help him somehow. As Hela grew, she longed to bring more Asgardian souls under her control, especially that of Odin and Thor, and so she and her father Loki attempted to bring Ragnarok by eliminating Balder and then attacking Asgard with a horde of monsters. That is, until their plan was thwarted by Odin after he used his power to revive Balder. Guess that's why she decided to take out Odin first in the movie.
Coming in at number 6, it's Odin. While the god of thunder Thor almost made this list, his father was and sometimes is still a hero, and he is much older than his son, as you might be able to guess, because father and son relationships be like that. While Marvel plays a little fast and loose with Thor's age, it most recently has been said to be roughly 4,000 years old, but his daddy? Marvel Comics changed Odin's age a few times for the sake of stories, but we can assume that Odin is quite old, far more than 1,000,000 years, as Odin was part of the Avengers of 1,000,000 BC, and by that time, he was seemingly in his prime like Thor is now. So yes, the All-Father, creator of Asgard and ruler of the Norse pantheon of gods, is pretty damn old. Who would have thought? Not me. But he is certainly no pushover, being the protector of the 10 realms. He is the strongest and wisest of all Asgardians. In his physical prime, he could lift 90 tons, but that number can be boosted up a whole lot to a whole other level thanks to Odin's ability to tap into the Odin Force, which has allowed him to headbutt Galactus into unconsciousness, which is really impressive. As an example of the power he wields, Odin had a fight with Seth, another god, which was waged on several planes of existence simultaneously and felt across infinite planes of reality. The energy released from their battle was so powerful it shattered entire galaxies, reignited dying suns, and ripped the fabric of the multiverse itself. So, yeah, he's pretty nuts. Number 5. The Immortal. Due to an accident that happened approximately 3,000 years ago in the Image Comics Invincible universe, the man who became the Immortal was exposed to an unknown anomaly that gave him superhuman abilities that put him almost on par with Viltrumites. Outside of his incredible strength, speed, durability, stamina, and flight powers, the Immortal is, you guessed it, immortal. Oh? Able to regenerate at an insanely fast rate, regrowing limbs and organs, not needing food, water, or oxygen to survive, and being immune to all poisons, toxins, venoms, viruses, bacteria, parasites, pathogens, and allergens. However, funnily enough, there is a way to, quote, kill him. If the Immortal's head is separated from his torso, it needs to be manually reattached for his healing factor to finally kick in. But despite that, even when they aren't attached, he still remains perfectly preserved until the reattachment happens. He's been around for so long that he has been a knight, possibly under King Arthur, an explorer connected to Christopher Columbus in the Spanish Armada. He fought in the American Revolution, became President of the United States by taking the alias of Abraham Lincoln, became President of the United States by taking the alias of someone you may know, Abraham Lincoln, and he fought as a soldier in the First World War. In the 1930s is when he finally officially became a superhero, and more recently became a member of the Guardians of the Globe. Coming in at number 4, Exodus. Grand Duke Benny du Paris was a 12th century nobleman from medieval France, so he is probably one of the youngest people to make this list. As an adult, Bennet was a crusader for the Knights Templar sent to Jerusalem during the Crusades, and he even became best friends with Eobar Garrington, the Black Knight of that era. The two had set out on a quest to find the Tower of Power, when his abilities manifested after an encounter with the Phoenix Force. This granted Bennet some pretty powerful telepathic powers, but pretty quickly, these powers were then improved upon thanks to the mutant Apocalypse, and his ability to augment other individuals. Unfortunately, Apocalypse also caused Exodus to be trapped in a tomb until the modern day when he was awoken by Magneto and joined his cause, which you think would make him a villain, but he has become more of a hero as time has gone on. Exodus is one of the most powerful psionic mutants in existence, with such a pristine use of telekinesis and telepathy that he can even alter electrons and molecules. His power is so strong that Marvel even had to debuff him by making his powers dependent on his or others' level of faith in him. Still, pretty powerful though. Number 3, the Eternals. Way back in the day, the Celestials came to Earth when proto-humans began to emerge, meaning around 2 to 5 million years ago. That's a long freaking time. The Celestial first host performed genetic experiments on those early humans, resulting in 3 groups. The Immortal and Superior Eternals, the pretty grotesque and monstrous deviants, and just plain Jane regular humans. The Eternals, aka Homo Immortalis, were basically created to defend the planet Earth, specifically from the deviants, and to serve Celestials. They became somewhat silent defenders of Homo sapiens, that's us, secluding themselves and rarely directly engaging with us. They built super impressive cities like Olympia, Titanos, Oceania, and Polaria, and their names have become intertwined with heroes throughout ancient history, like Gilgamesh. They are all incredibly powerful, and they are all immortal, being reborn if they ever actually are defeated. An average Eternal is intertwined with cosmic energy and can lift about 15 tons without using any form of telekinesis, but a few are able to lift up to 100 tons. Other Eternals specialize in different powers like telepathy and telekinesis, and all Eternals have the ability to join with one another to form the Unimind, made of light, mind, and pure energy. And I haven't even talked about the massive Eternals called the Hex, and I'm not going to, because we're moving on. Coming in at number 2, Eternal Warrior. Gilad Anipada from Valiant Comics was ancient before the rise of the Pharaohs, and apparently will also survive the fall of nations yet to come. Gilad, also known as the Eternal Warrior, is the youngest of 3 Eternal brothers. His siblings are Ivar, aka Time Walker, and Aram, aka Armstrong. They are all immortal and were born before recorded history, so that's a long time ago. The Eternal Warrior himself is a sworn protector to the Geomancers, who are basically humans who have a special bond with the spirit of the earth itself. When the current Geomancer is accidentally taken out by Obadiah Archer, Galad is driven by his duty to track down Obadiah and exact revenge. Only problem is, Archer happens to be one half of Archer and Armstrong. Armstrong being Galad's older brother that we just talked about, who he hasn't spoken to in decades. Armstrong tries to protect his best buddy Archer from his brother, but the relentless Galad eventually catches up to them, and the duo's only solution now is to find a new Geomancer. Archer and Armstrong eventually track down the new Geomancer, Kay McHenry, who convinces Galad to not obliterate the duo, which Galad is more than capable of doing with his thousands of years of fighting experience, his mastery in tactics, and being one of the greatest warriors on Earth. Not to mention his exceptional strength, inhuman durability, and endurance, and the ability to heal from pretty much any wound. And finally, in at number 1, it's Martian Manhunter. Martian Manhunter, aka John Johns, or John Jones on Earth, is the last of his race of Martians, and he is extremely powerful, and should never be slept on, but he usually is. He speaks with the resolve and intelligence of someone who's been around for a very hot minute, and that's because he has been. According to DC, he is in the ballpark of around, or over, 220 million years old. John arrived on Earth after he was pulled there through space and time by a teleportation beam during an experiment conducted by Dr. Saul Erdel, who passed away from the shock of actually finding a Martian shortly after this. But way before that, John's race was practically wiped out a long time ago, leaving him completely alone and isolated. But now, pulled forward in time and finally on Earth with no one to tell him what the hell was going on, he eventually used his shape-shifting abilities to become a detective operating in Middletown, America. For a long time, he mainly operated from the safety of his human persona before he eventually exposed himself to the world, not like that, and became a founding member of the Justice League, and also one of its most powerful and ancient members as well. Number 10, Mistress Death. To call this character evil is a bit of a miscommunication. She is just a law of the universe, a force of nature, a cosmic being carrying out her duty. But to many people, she is an evil entity because, losing a loved one is one of the most emotionally painful things we can go through. No matter if you see her as evil or just doing her job, she has been around since the creation of the universe, so there is no doubt that she is ancient. So I'm keeping her here at the top of the list because she isn't entirely evil and has comforted and even saved a few people on a few occasions, but still brings the end of the line. She keeps balance in the universe, taking away life while other cosmic entities give it. Also, she's a big part of the reason Thanos has done all the horrible things he's done in Marvel Comics, so there's that as well to make her seem a bit more evil.
Coming up on the 9th spot is No. That's with a K. And this fella is bad news. He's an eldritch entity, the god of darkness, ruler of the void, and oh yeah, homeboy created the symbiotes. Any evil that's come from the many symbiotes can all be traced back to No, who rules over the hive mind. When you stop and consider just how much suffering the symbiotes have been responsible for, how much damage and destruction, and all of that can be pointed back to Null, you gotta figure that is a pretty powerful ancient evil. Decked out with some sweet symbiote armor and an impressive sword, Null has his sights set on galactic conquest with his symbiote army. And honestly, he was making a pretty good play for the throne were he not stopped by Eddie Brock in a truly staggering duel of cosmic proportions. Sure, yeah, you might have birthed the symbiote race, but it's hard for anyone to top the guy who made symbiotes cool in the first place. You can't beat Venom. He's got his own theme song by Eminem. How many of us can say the same?
Number 8, Selene. While a lot of beings on this list are cosmic and godlike in their nature, Selene is a mutant external and a magician born 17,000 years ago. She gained the ability to psionically drain the life forces of other human beings into herself, gaining their memories, and if she fully drains them, turning that individual into dust. Yikes. Essentially, she is a vampire, just without any of the blood draining stuff. Using this drained energy, she not only sustains herself, but can grant herself superhuman levels of physical strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability. But that's not her only powers. As an external, she also possesses immortality, allowing her to even resurrect herself. Since she has been around for so long, she is quite the adept sorcerer and can do a hell of a lot with that power. She has demonstrated telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and the knack for being just pretty sinister.
Number 7, Shuma Gorath. Now maybe you remember Shuma Gorath from a star-studded appearance in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Except psych! Due to a licensing issue, that was actually Gargantos. But it was supposed to be Shumagorath, so you were right to think that. Marvel's resident Lovecraftian god, who's lived for millions of years beyond the stars. Even older than the Marvel Universe itself. Quite literally, if you want to get a bit metatextual with it, since Shumagorath began life as a villain for the Conan mythos, tying itself into the greater Cthulhu mythos with H.P. Lovecraft, who was a pretty good friend of Robert E. Howard back in the day. It's a pretty interesting backstory and makes sense since Shumagorath is an all-powerful multi-dimensional entity. It only makes sense that it exists across the multiverse in ours as well. Shumagorath is about as powerful as a Lovecraftian god can get, boasting all the usual feats: incredible strength, difficult to put down, all kinds of psychokinetic abilities that leads him into all sorts of clashes with everybody's favorite sorcerer, Doctor Strange.
At number 6 we have Mephisto. The origin story behind this primordial demon has been lost to time, as he's certainly older than any mortal who's ever existed. He's essentially every demon stereotype rolled into one, as he's the ruler of his own infernal dimension and often tries to get people to make soul bargains. As a matter of fact, it's thanks to these very deals that we're giving characters like Ghost Rider, the crew of the Flying Dutchman. Heck, he even directly instructed or inspired the wraths of terror brought on by the likes of Apocalypse and even Thanos. Marvel goes so far as to claim that it was Mephisto who disguised himself as a snake to get Adam and Eve kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So remember kids, if a demon is offering you a deal that sounds too good to be true, it's cause it is. But hey, at least you're usually getting something of equal value back for your soul. I've seen more treacherous contracts from cell phone providers. At number 5 we have Necron. You ever hear of the philosophical darkness that preceded the light? Well, his name is Necron, and he's the leader of the Black Lantern Corps and the Lord of the Unliving. And that wasn't even a monetization friendly self-censor either. That's the actual title of the land that he rules over, where the souls of the unalive await passage to their final residence, like a sort of purgatory. And it's from these unliving souls that Necron draws his power. He first became a threat to Earth after becoming aware of our reality's existence when an interdimensional rift is accidentally opened between the two dimensions after a paradox occurs in which an immortal being was banished to the realm of the dead, the unalive, YouTube. Anyhow, desiring the world that he was now able to see, but being too large to pass through the rift, Necron imbues that aforementioned immortal with enormous power and sends him to go terminate the Guardians of the Universe in an attempt to increase the size of the rift. And that immortal, whose name I don't want to give away because he may or may not be the top spot on this list, does his part and sends several Guardians and Green Lanterns to go see Necron, if you catch my drift. That is until Hal Jordan managed to enter Necron's realm, inciting the spirits of the recently defeated Lanterns to rebel against Necron, distracting him long enough for the Lanterns on the other side to seal up the rift, albeit with Hal trapped inside. Poor guy. At number 4 we have Shumagorath. Now you may recognize him as the dimension-hopping Gargantos from Multiverse of Madness, but make no mistake, that one-eyed monster in the movie is modeled after Shumagorath. They just couldn't use the name in the film because of legal reasons. Because everyone knows how much lawyers love to ruin everything we love for the money. Oh, I'm sorry. You want to call this fictional one-eyed tentacle monster a particular name? To the courts! Jokes aside, Shuma owes his apparent ancientness to the fact that he belongs to a group of cosmic nightmares called the Old Ones, so he's not exactly trying to hide it. After conquering and ruling over hundreds of dimensions, Shumagorath and his gang of geriatrics came to the Marvel continuity realm on numerous occasions, the first of which being well over 1,000,000 years ago. Though on each visit he goes on conquering Earth, tyrannizing the people, and commanding human sacrifices and tribal wars. That is until he's inevitably banished by sorcerers or gods, at least temporarily. Shuma's never discouraged, however, because when you've lived through countless eternities, what's a few 100,000 years? At number 3 we have Ra's al Ghul, whose name by the way literally translates from Arabic as head of the demon. Just badass. The first mention of Ra's al Ghul in recorded history comes from the Crusades back in 1285. And if that's not ancient enough for you, too bad, deal with it, man. Even way back then, Ra's was so feared that the people of his time gave his name the Voldemort treatment, never so much as uttering his name, as he was rumored to be a creature unbound by even death itself, with the power to crush entire civilizations in the palm of his hand. Unbeknownst to the populace at the time, he owed much of his claim to fame to the League of Assassins, which he founded, who were so good at doing their job unnoticed that all of their nefarious accomplishments were accredited singularity to the Ghoul, or at least that's how it was in the beginning. Ra and his gang have been able to survive all these centuries thanks to bathing regularly in supernatural Lazarus pits, which grants Ghoul immorality, heals his injuries, and even flushes out your pores. At number 2 we have Nathaniel Richards, otherwise known as Kang the Conqueror. You heard me right, ladies and gents. He who remains at the end of time is simultaneously one of the most ancient beings in the Marvel Universe. How can that be, you ask? 2 words, my friend: time travel. Or dimension hopping, depending on how you want to look at it. And for as simple as those two words are, they make for one of the most convoluted characters in comic book history, as there are innumerable iterations of the character spanning across countless eons. Like, for example, there are versions of Nathaniel who become Rama-Tut before becoming Kang, others who after becoming Kang become Rama-Tut again, only to then become either Immortus or Scarlet Centurion, and or back to Kang. Some flip back and forth between Rama-Tut and Kang before becoming Mr. Griffin, while other Kangs don't become Kang at all, but instead become Iron Lad, and then from Iron Lad you get Kid Immortus, and then back to Kang. Yeah, it's messy. But the point here is that even though Nathaniel Richards was born in the furthest future, making him one of the youngest beings in the Marvel Universe, he is simultaneously one of the most ancient villains, as thanks to his time machine, he was able to instate himself as the pharaoh in ancient Egypt. At number 1, we have Krona. So if I'm gonna go and bend the rules on what qualifies as an ancient villain with Kang, there's no way I'm gonna leave out the guy whose time-traveling shenanigans caused the very birth of evil itself. No kidding, guys, time travel ain't a joke. Born amongst the race of beings responsible for the creation of the Lantern Rings, that being the Malthusians, Krona was a scientist who allowed his thirst for knowledge to corrupt his morality, creating experiments to the detriment of the entire cosmos. His forbidden experiments culminated in the time machine that would allow himself to witness the beginning of time itself, where, or should I say when, he was able to catch a glimpse of the hand of creation depositing the speck that would become the universe. But at that instant, his time machine exploded, fracturing the universe into infinite shatters that would become the multiverse, and simultaneously unleashing the primordial evil. This was the final straw that enabled the Malthusians to take action against Krona, converting him into a state of pure energy which was sent to circle the universe for all of eternity. But eventually it ended up in the dimension of the unalive, and thus introducing Necron to our reality. Gee, thanks! What a helpful chap. I mean, who wouldn't want not one, but two primordial evils adding more chaos and destruction to our already hectic lives? I mean, it's not like we were lacking in the villain department after your first screw up. Some people just never learn.
Number 10, the Question. In the Prime Earth continuity, the Question, or a version of the Question, is revealed to be one of the oldest beings in the world of DC. This is revealed after we learn that the Question was one of the criminals in essence that the Circle of Eternity, located at the Rock of Eternity, chose to punish for their crimes against humanity. This group of beings who were punished were known as the Trinity of Sin. The Question would go on to become a hero following this. This version of the Question is largely a mysterious figure who has not appeared as much, probably because the original version of the character, Vic Sage, and his predecessor, Renee Montoya, ended up both returning to the comics recently. What we do know is that the Question had his memory erased from history and from himself, with even his face being left completely featureless, so he could never remember who he was. This was part of his punishment, but also done to guarantee that the Question would not be able to rise up once more as he had threatened to do originally, since he would no longer be able to remember what exactly he had done and why in the first place. So how can he return if he doesn't even know, why he was doing it in the first place? And apparently, we may never get to know any of this either, unless somebody returns to tell the rest of this version of the Question's tale. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you also love superheroes that are surprisingly old, be sure to let us know by giving this video a thumbs up. Number 9, the Eternals. The Eternals are simply a group of heroes most people don't often think of, which is why I'm including them here. Despite them coming to the MCU, I would still say there are tons out there who have fallen off the MCU bandwagon recently and kind of just weren't particularly compelled to watch this film. So there are still a lot who do not know about the Eternals, which is unfortunate. This is a huge shame, I think, because the Eternals are really a cool group of heroes who have existed for millennia. Initially, their origin was that they were prehistoric humans who were basically modified by celestial tech, turned into their own race of beings. Later on, we'd get an additional bit of information on their origin in terms of kind of how they worked, how they operated, with them being resurrected by the Great Machine on the regular anytime they died. That's how they were eternal, almost being like kind of androids with a soul in a sense at one point. The Great Machine is actually also Earth, which is both a big blue ball that everyone lives on and at its core an actual machine, a resurrection machine in part. Its survival is intrinsic to the survival of Earth and all life forms living on it, and it was, up until recently, also tied to the Eternals, meaning that for Earth to continue, the Eternals would also have to continue continue to be called into existence. The Eternals, being ancient heroes, were initially the enemies of the Deviants, who were also created by the Celestials. They defended Earth against the Dark Celestials, or they tried to, and have also become ingrained in human mythology, with them being the real-world heroes from ancient epics and folklore. Hawkgirl. While Hawkman recently appeared in Black Adam in the DCEU, which has been rebranded with their highly anticipated reset impending as simply the DCU, Hawkman isn't the only hero out there who is ancient among the Justice Society. And no, I'm not talking about Dr. Fate, who also is pretty old. In fact, many people probably didn't even know that Hawkman was really even ancient per se. He doesn't look old, that's for sure, but he is, in fact, not in body, but in soul. Hawkman is the reincarnated soul of ancient Egyptian Prince Khufu Qatar. Carter Hall is only the latest in a line of incarnations of the prince in the comics, and his love, Shayara, was also reincarnated as well throughout the years, becoming known as the hero Hawkgirl and also as Hawkwoman. Later, this origin would be retconned, tweaked somewhat, so they'd actually be even older than ancient Egypt, instead becoming ancient aliens from the planet Thanagar, who simply came to Earth. Their original souls in this version of the tale were each believed to belong to Shra and Qatar the Deathbringer, who were both cursed to be reincarnated alongside each other throughout eternity. Number 7. Gaia. Gaia is someone that we perhaps don't think of as being an ancient superhero, because, well, we just don't really think of Gaia that much. She hails from Marvel Comics and is the goddess of Earth. Gaia is seen as one of the oldest gods that Marvel has to offer us, being one of their elder gods. In fact, Gaia is kind of one of the only elder gods who could be seen as heroic or good. At least one of I would say she's up there, considering she is one of the few who managed to avoid becoming a demon. She also actively sought out the Demiurge in order to produce offspring that would help to rid the universe of the other elder gods who had been corrupted after they became demonic, giving birth to Atom, who then became the Demigorge, the God Eater. She's probably also one of the oldest heroes mentioned on this list at all, so there's also that.
Number 6, the Black Winter. You know, Galactus almost made this list, but why choose him when you can choose a bigger version of him? Where Galactus consumes individual planets, the Black Winter devours entire realities. The Black Winter, the Star Plague, the Blight Storm, the Rot Blizzard, or the Fimbulwinter, for the Norse mythology people out there, was the one who brought the end of the 6th iteration of the universe, leaving only Galen of the planet Ta, and that's the guy who becomes Galactus. When the Black Winter arrives in the Marvel Universe, in the latest run of Thor, Galactus turns an All-Father Thor, who possesses the Thor Force, into his Herald of Thunder, and it's awesome, granting him the power cosmic, and an attack from this Thor only stops the Black Winter for a total of 14 seconds. That's how powerful this multiversal entity is. Luckily though, at this time, the Black Winter isn't here to destroy the universe, he is just here for his herald, Galactus. Luckily, Thor turns Galactus into a massive power cosmic explosion that destroys the Black Winter. It's all just super awesome. Definitely check it out. Number 5. Larfleeze. Larfleeze, or Agent Orange, is one unique character in the emotional spectrum, and that's because he's the sole wielder of the Orange Light of Avarice. He is the only member of the Orange Lantern Corps. Larfleeze is driven by an insatiable greed that grants him dominion over all that he desires, driving him into conflict with whoever possesses what it is that he desires, and over the power of the Orange Lanterns, which represent greed. His power is centered on his ability to conjure constructs using the stolen identity and forms of those he has absorbed into his horde, making him basically an army unto himself. This ability extends even to abstract concepts and beings, showcasing the extent of his control. The big thing about Larfleeze is that since he's spent so much time with his Orange Lantern and Ring, he has basically become the Orange Lantern and Ring himself. This energy grants him huge levels of power. His constructs are virtually indestructible and can overwhelm even the most powerful opponents. However, Larfleeze's power comes at the cost of his individuality, as his insatiable greed makes him less of a person and more of a living embodiment of greed itself. Even without the power of the Orange Lanterns though, his race is already basically immortal, with Larfleeze himself being billions of years old, and with enough power that I seriously doubt he'll be going down anytime soon.
Number 4. Thulsa Doom. When it comes to Conan, he definitely has a type when it comes to some of his greatest enemies. Typically, he's caught in the midst of epic battles against evil sorcerers or wizards. In Thulsa Doom's case, his brand of evil magic user is Necromancer. While Thulsa Doom became a famous Conan villain thanks to his appearance as the main antagonist in the 1982 Conan the Barbarian movie, he initially started out as a villain for what some consider to be a more nuanced barbarian hero also created by Robert E. Howard, Kull of Atlantis, or Kull the Conqueror, as he was also known.
Number 3. Shumagorath. Yes, it is a giant tentacled eyeball, but hold off on the laughter because Shumagorath the Destroyer, the Conqueror of Midnight, the All-Killer of the Dawn, is a ridiculously ancient being and greatest of the old gods, or the many-angled ones. Among his many powers is the ability to communicate with and control others nearby and across entire dimensions. He can create and direct powerful blasts of mystical energy and affect transmutations on a planetary scale. His skin alone is difficult to damage even with the most powerful of magics. While his form seems pretty silly, cause it is, it's actually only a shell containing his power, and he can alter this appearance however he sees fit. This is actually because it's not even his true form. His true form is apparently not even comprehensible to us humans. Boo. Shumagorath can destroy multiple galaxies solely through his aura pressure, and this old god has also the ability to destroy entire realities. He is the most powerful in his home dimension, just like others of his kind, and only part of his power has actually appeared on Earth. And with the stuff he has done with that fraction of power, that should tell you just how powerful he is.
Number 2. Skrulls. All of them. There's many. They're not all bad, but they started bad. That's right, Skrulls are some of the oldest villains around, although they aren't exactly considered clean-cut villains anymore. In fact, some Skrulls have even become better known as heroes in recent years. Originally though, Skrulls appeared as a villainous alien race in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Issue number 2, and who were focused solely, during their appearance, on basically conquering Earth. This was right after the FF team had been introduced in the previous issue, which was basically all Issue 1 was really about, the team's origin story. The Skrulls knew that the FF were the main protectors of Earth, at this point anyways, despite the fact that they had just sorta, started their superhero careers, which is pretty crazy. Knowing this, the Skrulls decided to pose as the FF and commit a bunch of villainous deeds while impersonating them, hoping to discredit the Fantastic Four to the point that the US military would capture and then kill the Fantastic team. With the Fantastic Four disposed of, the Earth would then be ripe for the Skrulls' taking. Of course, this plan was foiled as the FF trapped the imposters and ended up posing as them, taking the Skrulls' idea but executing it much better. Disguised as the Skrulls, the FF would tell the Skrull leader that Earth's defenses were too powerful for the invasion to succeed, causing them to just call off the invasion. The Skrulls that originally posed as the Fantastic Four members were forced to stay behind after the invasion left, taking the form of cows and living in apparent peace, as they apparently really enjoyed living as cows. Skrulls themselves can live hundreds of years, and their empire has existed for tens of millions of years, which means those cows are gonna be really old.
Can you imagine you're like millions of years old conquerors, and then you go to the planet, you make all yours like all the way there, and then someone's like, you know what, I think it's gonna be too hard, and they're just like, you're right, let's just go.
You're right.
You're right, we should just go.
And then those guys are just like, why don't we just be cows?
And
That's your life.
Moo. Number 1, the Great Darkness. You can't get much more ancient than existing before creation itself. The Great Darkness was the literal darkness and nothingness that existed before the Presence ever came to be. When the Presence, aka God in DC Comics, said, "Let there be light," the Great Darkness is the one who went into hiding. At some point, a clan known as the Brujeria, I believe is how you pronounce it, attempted a ritual to reawaken the Great Darkness in order to destroy God and reshape the universe. Instead of being completely evil though, this was more like an animal who was confused and didn't understand its power or what its purpose even was in the universe. The Great Darkness, also sometimes referred to as the Great Evil Beast, went on a warpath, easily defeating many heroes and waging a solo assault on heaven itself, decimating everything in its way to demand answers from the Presence. It even caused the 3 main figures of Hell to form a union with each other just in case something went wrong. When the Great Darkness reached heaven though, it met Swamp Thing of all people, who taught it the concept of good and evil, explaining that one couldn't survive without the other. The darkness then reached up and God reached back and they became one and the same as like yin and yang, or as a balance. Recently though, the Great Darkness played a large role in the Dark Crisis event. It's basically the overarching villain of the entire DC multiverse, but also just kind of force of nature doing its thing. Coming in at number 10 is Selene. Selene is a mutant and what is known as an external. Externals are essentially a group of immortals that include characters like Apocalypse and Gideon, who can resurrect themselves and all share a psychic link, which is the main thing that separates them from other immortals. Selene is also a magician and was born 17,000 years ago. She gained the ability to psionically drain the life forces of other human beings into herself, gaining their memories, and if she fully drains them, turning that individual into dust. Essentially, she's like an energy vampire. Using this drained energy, she not only sustains herself, but can grant herself superhuman levels of physical strength, speed, stamina, agility, reflexes, and durability. Since she has been around for so long, she is quite the adept sorcerer and can do a hell of a lot with that power. She's demonstrated telepathy, telekinesis, pyrokinesis, and a knack for being pretty sinister, but not really being too well known to casual fans. Number 9. Barbados. Barbados is one of the big bads from the death metal event, but because we had the Batman Who Laughs, I think Barbados kind of fell by the wayside for a few people, and I'll admit, I was one of them. But Barbados is nothing to scoff at. In the earliest days of existence, two siblings came into reality, tasked with monitoring creation. Along with them came a third being known as the Forger, who was set to watch over creations that would exist in the future. The Forger made its home in the Forge of Worlds inside what would later be named the Dark Multiverse. The Forger created universes based on the hopes and fears of every living thing. And while the stable universes became part of the multiverse, the Forger would dispatch its dragon to destroy the unstable worlds so that their energy could be returned to the Forge and recycled. That dragon is Barbados. Barbados had a lust for destruction, which eventually led him to take out the Forger and corrupt the World Forge. The unstable worlds persisted beyond their time and became part of the Dark Multiverse field with horrifying realities. He then changed his goals, setting his warpath onto the regular multiverse. Now fast forward multiple centuries, and Barbados' followers started to secretly prepare Batman to become the doorway for Barbados to enter the Prime Earth from the Dark Multiverse, causing a big old mess in the DC Multiverse. Number 8. Decimus Furious. Decimus Furious actually began his life all the way back in ancient Rome, where his mother and father took their own lives, leaving Decimus homeless on the streets. In 281 AD, while on the cusp of the afterlife and in incredible pain due to his hunger, this mutant's powers finally activated. He gained superhuman strength and durability alongside an extremely bestial form similar to a minotaur, but almost as if made of stone, like a minotaur statue, but cooler. While he is incredibly strong and durable, his even more powerful mutant ability is called Empathic War Infection. This basically means that Decimus can infect anyone who he strikes with a thirst for war, which will send them into a rage-filled state. It also acts as a defensive tool against telepaths who try to read or control his mind, causing the war infection to overcome the telepath. He has also been shown to be able to piece himself back together after being blown up, which is funny because he blew up when Phantom X made him feel love, which did not compute, and he went boom. Decimus became Apocalypse's final horseman of war. And in at number 7 is Conquest. Viltrumites, who are featured in Image Comics' Invincible series, are incredibly hardy folk. They have levels of strength and durability akin to Superman without having to be solar charged and without being allergic to big green rocks. They also grow stronger and stronger with both age and experience. One of their oldest, most honored warriors is a Viltrumite by the name of Conquest. Viltrumites live for a very long time. Nolan Grayson, Omni-Man, is a fully adult Viltrumite, and he has lived for thousands and thousands of years, and he has only a small show of white hair to show for it. Of all the Viltrumites seen in the comics, a rare few have fully white hair. Conquest not only has that, but he has lost a lot of his hair, is super wrinkly, and he's also battle scarred and missing an arm. Back in the day, the Viltrumites were exposed to a virus that nearly wiped them out, called the Scourge virus. Conquest was one of the few that survived, but he was left weakened after it left his system, which happened to coincide with his arrival on a planet filled with Ragnar, which are the only species in the universe that can actually kill Viltrumites. So that's where the missing arm and scarring comes from. Conquest is one of the strongest Viltrumites around, and even when his face is turned into tomato soup by Invincible, he still regenerates and comes back for round 2.
And at 6, Dr. Fate. Nabu the Wise was a Lord of Order and cosmic being who arrived at Earth billions of years ago to take on a proactive role in battling the Lords of Chaos. A cosmic being with near limitless magical power, his spirit resides in the Helmet of Fate and is the source of the great power held by those who wear the mantle of Dr. Fate. Dr. Fate is just the helmet. fun fact. You all knew that. Dr. Fate's origins begin over 10 billion years ago, which I personally think qualifies as ancient, or maybe even older than that, if there is anything older than that. I don't know. My senior year Comtech teacher was pretty old. But not long after the formation of the universe, were there born two elemental forces, the Lords of Order and the Lords of Chaos. You can kind of see where this conflict is going. On the world called Celia, the Lords of Order manifested themselves, the first sentient race in the universe, and a race of incorporeal magical beings at that. After millennia, circa 3500 BCE, the Lords of Order descended onto Earth and then became Nabu the Wise, who was also an advisor to the pharaohs of Egypt. He's old, okay? I don't know what else I need. I said 10 billion years. I think that's pretty solid.
Number 5, Conan the Barbarian. That's right, Conan is an ancient superhero who actually also hails from Marvel. Not only that, but he was also an Avenger. Despite technically being a Marvel superhero, Conan is also kind of otherworldly, hailing from the sword and fantasy genre of comics. Although for Marvel, Conan is still labeled as an Earth 616 character, hailing from their main comic book reality. He does, however, come from the Hyborian Age, an old hero from the past. But he was one of the heroes still summoned by Doctor Strange and Elektra when they brought together their own team of Savage Avengers to stand against the threat of Kulan Gath. This went down in Jerry Dugan and Adam Gorham's Savage Avengers series, which I still really want to read. It looks super good. It just looks like such a great time. And Conan's presence on the team is definitely part of the reason for my motivation to jump into this series. Hopefully in the near future. I have a lot of things to read.
And at 4, Mr. Majestic. I put this here because I like the word majestic, but also this is kind of weird. Mr. Majestic is a Wildstorm comic superhero created by H.K. Prager and Jim Lee. He made his first appearance in Wild Cats number 11 as a backup story, but he's known for being the strongest superhero in the Wildstorm universe, and he shares quite a few similarities with Superman. But given that Wildstorm is owned by DC, there shouldn't really be any conflict there. Mr. Majestic is originally from the planet Kara and was known as Magistros, but yeah, this isn't like Superman at all. I don't know what you're talking about. Why are you saying that? He has 2 kids, Kanesha and Magistrate, but there was also an infertility crisis in his homeworld, which resulted in only 1 child per woman. Yeah, so how did this happen? Well, Magistros and Coda warrior Lady Xana, who was also later known as other things, it doesn't matter. They were chosen not to breed, but since Coda warriors became priestesses after giving birth, Xana's mother pretended that Kanesha was stillborn and then claimed to have given birth to her herself. Yeah, so basically Kanesha passed off her daughter as her sister, which is a whole... They're old. It's old. It's an old thing. I don't...
Number 3, Starbrand. Vin is the Starbrand in 1 million BCE. He ends up becoming the Starbrand after leaving his tribe. He left them because he believed he did not belong due to the fact that he realized he was gay. Something that seemed to be unacceptable to his people in that time. On his journey, he sought out a garden he had seen in a dream, which it turned out appeared to be the biblical paradise known as the Garden of Eden. Once he found it, he also found Burke. Also no vowels. No vowels for these people in prehistoric times. The 2 men became lovers, but would eventually be separated after Burke died in a deviant attack. It seemed the deviants wanted the garden for themselves. The attack resulted in a cave-in, and while Burke did not survive, Vin did, finding the body of a dinosaur who had previously been the Starbrand. Vin was imbued with its powers and fought against those who had killed Burke. However, in the process, this also destroyed the garden. Vin would go on to become the hero known as Starbrand in his time and join up with the other Stone Age Avengers of 1 million BCE.
But ultimately, in number 2, Doctor Strange Fate. Doctor Strange Fate is the amalgam of Doctor Strange, Charles Xavier, and Dr. Fate. Yeah, they're present in the amalgam universe of Earth 9602, and given that both the Sorcerer Supreme and Dr. Fate are present, I think that this qualifies as ancient. Dr. Fate alone just makes that happen. Strange Fate learned that 2 keys controlled by Access would restore the DC Comics and Marvel Comics universes to their own worlds, which would result in the destruction of the amalgam universe and therefore him. So, to keep his universe intact, Doctor Strange Fate recruits Jade Nova, Skulk, and White Witch to capture Access and bring him to Strange Fate so that the amalgam universe can remain active. But it turns out that he was actually a part of a problem, or a part of the problem. That's a story for another day. But Doctor Strange, yes, the real one, preserved the amalgam universe in a pocket dimension, essentially making it its own multiverse in a sense. But I also bring this up because I like the amalgam universe, okay? It's cool. Iron Lantern, Lobo the Duck, Hell yeah.
Number 1. Man-Thing Sorcerer Supreme. Perhaps even more surprising is a reality where the Man-Things rule the planet. Their version of the 1 million BCE Avengers team is filled exclusively with Man-Things as a result. One of these Man-Things is known as the Sorcerer Supreme on this planet in the reality we know as Earth 91. Unfortunately, we do not get to know too much about this version of Man-Thing, as he is killed by the Masters of Evil when they come to his reality in Avengers Forever issue number 5 from 2022. What we do know is that, like Dr. Stephen Strange and many other Sorcerer Supremes, this Man-Thing does seem to possess a cape, although it is a bit shorter than Strange's, I would say. His version of the Eye of Agamotto, or his version of the third eye, I'm not really sure what's going on with this, also seems to be something that he has, but he wears inside his chest, or on his chest. I think Dr. Strange ends up with a third eye at one point, but he's also got the Eye of Agamotto, so I don't know. Instead of Man-Thing wearing this anywhere else or having it on a chain or a necklace, implying, that this eye is a part of him. Or perhaps it's simply, like I said, just a third eye, and it's just on the chest. I feel like that wouldn't be, I guess he doesn't really wear clothes because he's a Man-Thing, so actually I guess it'd be fine. Number 10. Vandal Savage. Vandal Savage is definitely one of the most ancient villains out there. It's actually kind of like his whole thing. Savage originally existed all the way back in the prehistoric ages, having initially been a caveman. He got his powers from a radioactive meteorite, which granted him immortality and enhanced intelligence. Even way back then, he was fighting heroes like Batman, if you can believe it. This was after Batman was sent on some time adventures after facing off against Darkseid. While he was suspected as being dead, in reality, Darkseid's Omega Sanction had simply banished Batman to wander through time, which actually kind of sounds nice to me, except that part of this punishment was that his lives that he would experience were all supposed to be, well, pretty awful. Still though, when facing off against Vandal Savage, even with Vandal's somewhat newfound powers, Batman won. You can be ancient and immortal, but that doesn't mean that you're immune from being beaten by Batman, right? Batman's got that plot armor, baby. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we're doing here on Top 10 Nerd, and you love when I talk about supervillains, I know I do, be sure to check out our supervillains playlist over on the channel for even more good villainous content. Number 9. Surtur. Surtur is not someone we think of too often or even touch on, but he's a pretty big deal in the comics, and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. In the MCU, he successfully managed to destroy Asgard, fulfilling his prophesized role in Ragnarok. And what's more, Thor knew that this was what needed to be done in order to stop his sister Hela. So despite facing off against Surtur initially, he ended up having to be the one to free him so that the prophecy could actually be realized, sacrificing the place of Asgard in order to save the people of Asgard. In the comics, Surtur is an ancient foe, having been the sworn enemy of Odin for, well, pretty much forever. He hails from Muspelheim, and even for years successfully stopped Odin from achieving an alliance between the people of Odin's own Asgardian tribe, the Aesir, and the other Asgardian tribe known as the Vanir. Number 8. Circe. Circe is amazing. Definitely one of my favorite ancient villains around, possibly one of my favorite DC villains of all time around. Being that she is also the Circe from ancient Greek myth, I think you can understand just how old she is. Circe is known for being a powerful witch, and in the Prime Earth continuity was also revealed to be one of Hecate's witch marked. Her insane magical ability is how she has been able to survive for so long, without also appearing to have aged much at all. However, I will also add that in the New Earth continuity, this is also thanks to the fact that Circe is actually descended from Titans, which not only makes her immortal and ageless, but also pretty durable as well. Circe is known for being a powerful Wonder Woman foe, but despite the fact that Wonder Woman is really well known among comic fans, I feel like her villains get less time in the spotlight for, for some reason, despite the fact that Wonder Woman actually has a pretty stacked rogues gallery all her own. And like Circe, many of them also seem to have a rich and interesting history. Seriously, I feel like Circe could just have her own comic series. That's how much she has and has had going on throughout her life and throughout the comics. Number 7. Morgan Le Fay. Speaking of powerful witches, Morgan Le Fay is a villain we really don't get to showcase or focus on a lot on this channel, so I am taking this opportunity to remind you of just how ancient and how badass she is. Morgan Le Fay is a villain who hails originally from Arthurian legend and was adopted as a character in Marvel Comics all the way back in 1955, making her first appearance in Black Knight issue number 1. But of course, she's actually much older than 1955 in terms of her canon character history. Morgan Le Fay existed just after the ancient and mythical times of the island of Atlantis. In this version of the story, not all of the island was lost, and actually some islands that were part of Atlantis still existed, chiefly Avalon, which is where Morgan was born. Unfortunately, the remaining isles of Atlantis would eventually also be drowned and swallowed up by the sea, causing Morgan, her mother, and the man who would become known as Merlin to flee to Britain. This all happened before the 6th century, with Morgan eventually temporarily becoming Merlin's apprentice. As a villain, Morgan has not only tormented the people of her own time period, but she has also traveled to the present day and threatened the people and heroes of that time as well.
Number 6, Male Bolgia. And we are sticking with Image Comics for this point, but moving away from Invincible, we are going to talk about Spawn. Now, yes, I am a little lacking in the knowledge department when it comes to Spawn comics, but I do know that the whole reason Al Simmons became a Hellspawn in the first place is because of this guy, the ruler of the 8th sphere of Hell, Male Bolgia. Over 70,000 years ago, this being was created by a past ruler of Hell out of necroplasm rivers, but he was so powerful that he betrayed, overpowered, and took the life of his creator. In order to wage war on heaven and destroy God, he created an army of Hellspawn, but he needed a general, which he couldn't find until he found Al Simmons. He made a deal with a man named Jason Wynn to take Al's life, which is when Male Bolgia made a deal for Al to become his general in exchange for being able to see his wife. But in the end, it didn't really work out too well for this ruler of Hell, did it? Nope. Number 5, Gaia. Speaking of Thor though, last time we talked about Thor's papa, Odin, and for this list, I think we should talk about Thor's mama, Gaia. Gaia was one of the elder gods who materialized on Earth way before any life ever appeared here. Unfortunately, the rest of the gods, following the example of the serpent elder god Set, started consuming each other, which turned all but Gaia into demons. In order to better protect life on Earth, Gaia summoned the Demiurge and mated with it to give birth to her first son ever, Demogorge the God Eater. This Demogorge devoured all the demons except those that escaped, like Set and Chthon. Gaia then merged with the Earth itself and dedicated herself to guiding evolution, and that sounds pretty heroic to me. She is one of the oldest and most powerful deities in Marvel Comics, which makes her and Odin's eventual son, Thor, even more of a force to be reckoned with. Number 4, Hawkman. Hawkman is a bit of a doozy to talk about. Essentially, he has two main origins. He was either a space cop or a reincarnated prince. Since we are talking old and ancient today, we will focus on the reincarnated prince story. Basically, Hawkman's secret identity is Carter Hall, an archaeologist and museum curator who is actually a reincarnation of the ancient Egyptian prince, Khufu. Khufu, who would become known as Hawkman, discovered an alien spacecraft from the planet Thanagar, powered by an anti-gravity metal element called the Nth metal, which transformed his soul and doomed him and his love to be reincarnated over and over and over again throughout time. Some of his incarnations include Brian Kent, the Silent Knight from 5th century Britain, Conrad von Grimm, the son of a blacksmith in 14th century Germany, Captain John Smith of the 16th century, Hannibal Hawks, the Nighthawk in the American Old West, Detective James Wright, a Pinkerton detective in the 20th century, and finally, Carter Hall himself. Number 3, Venom. Since we all know Venom as being an enemy of Spider-Man, it's easy to forget that he has been around for a much longer amount of time than the web slinger himself, at least in the fictional world. The symbiote that later became known as Venom was spawned at some point during the reign of the Dark Elder God Null, which is a long one, and there is no specific Earth year when this happened, so it's hard to say just how ancient this symbiote actually is, but we know he had a life long before encountering Spider-Man. Unfortunately, the symbiote's memories have all been altered or erased a whole whack of times. It has been said that Venom was the 998th of its lineage, hatching from a clutch of eggs in a cavern on Clintar. That's the symbiote homeworld. Though it does have memories of being present on Gore's homeworld as well, so it's a little confusing. Basically, in the ancient past, the symbiote was once the loyal thrall of Null, but at some point the symbiote refused to obey his wishes anymore, and venom was cast out of the hive, doomed to wander aimlessly across the cosmos. The symbiote eventually discovered the Kree explorers, who decided to harvest it for further study. It was then bonded to a soldier named Telkar and underwent months of training alongside him before they were dispatched to fight in the Kree-Skrull War. Before eventually leaving Telkar, and after a whack more adventures, the symbiote ended up becoming bonded to Spider-Man during Secret Wars. Number 2, Etrigan. Etrigan the demon was the firstborn of Belial, who was such a handful that Belial exiled Etrigan's mother to Masak Mavdil and told his son that his antics drove her away. That's a bad dad. I don't think this is the son's fault. His antics, that we just talked about, ended up even driving Belial out of hell for several decades, returning with another son born of a mortal witch named Merlin. Etrigan was originally summoned to Earth to serve Merlin in a desperate final attempt to protect Camelot from the evil witch Morgane Le Fay. Merlin bound the demon to a mortal man named Jason, and while Merlin went into hiding to rest, these two lived a very long and brutal life through history. Basically, how it would go is that Etrigan incited war and strife, and in return, Jason gained wealth and status. Not a horrible idea, but despite sharing the same body, the demon and his host are usually at odds with each other, and Jason retains a lot of guilt based on Etrigan's actions, which I think played a part in him being a bit more heroic, or as heroic as a demon can be. But finally, in at number 1, it's Thor. Being the son of Odin the Allfather, who appeared in part 1, and Gaia, an elder god who appeared on this list, Thor is incredibly old, approximately 4,000 years, although at other times it has been said to be even longer. Thor has all the incredible powers of the Asgardians, but boosted to a whole other level thanks to his mother's elder god status. As the god of strength, as well as thunder, he is one of the strongest Marvel characters, being able to either defeat or stalemate astronomically stronger beings like the Midgard Serpent, the Hulk, the Silver Surfer, Gladiator, and Hercules. His stamina lets him basically fight forever, and he's next to completely invulnerable, not to mention his weather and energy manipulation and the use of his hammer, which make this guy almost impossible to bring down. Even when he isn't in possession of his hammer and is just Thor Odinson, he is still a force to be reckoned with, and especially recently, he keeps getting more and more boost to his power. This character has been around for an incredibly long time, and he just gets more and more powerful as time goes on. Number 10, the Immortal. With a name like the Immortal, you bet your socks this guy has been around for a hot minute. Due to an accident that happened approximately 3,000 years ago, the man who became the Immortal was exposed to an unknown anomaly that gave him superhuman abilities that put him almost on par with Viltrumites, making him one of the 3 known beings in the universe that can make that claim. But outside of his incredible strength, speed, durability, stamina, and flight powers, the Immortal is, you guessed it, immortal. Able to regenerate at an insanely fast rate, regrowing limbs and organs, not needing food, water, or oxygen to survive, and being immune to all poisons, toxins, venoms, viruses, bacteria, parasites, pathogens, and allergens. However, funnily enough, there is a way to, quote, kill him. If the Immortal's head is separated from his torso, it needs to be manually reattached for his healing factor to activate. But despite that, even when they aren't attached, he still remains perfectly preserved until the reattachment happens. He's been around for so long that he's been a knight, possibly under King Arthur as Lancelot, an explorer under or possibly as Christopher Columbus in the Spanish Armada. He fought in the American Revolution, became president of the United States by taking the alias of this guy Abraham Lincoln you might have heard of, and he fought as a soldier in the First World War. In the 1930s is when he officially became a superhero, and more recently became a member of the Guardians of the Globe.
And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button? Hey. Click it! Number 9, The Darkness. The story featuring this host of The Darkness is so vicious and bloody, but also just so raw and emotional. I love it personally. While many think of a Jackie Estacado when they think of The Darkness, he is not the only host the Darkness entity has ever had, which honestly, if you're familiar with the story of Jackie, you probably also kind of know that because, you know, it gets passed down. In fact, there were many who came before Jackie. Case in point, Estacado, the Darkness host who is a leader of a Visigoth tribe during the final days of the ancient Roman Empire, circa 410 BC, after its downfall had really already begun, and some would say even kind of already concluded, I guess. Estacado is a known rebel against the Roman Empire, and a powerful one at that, wielding the Darkness in his fight against the last standing Roman legions. He ends up going going head to head with Legatus and his legion after already dying and being resurrected by the darkness twice. While he offers Legatus a chance to surrender, Legatus knows he is doomed either way since the Roman Empire is coming to an end, and so chooses not to back down as he doesn't really see surrendering as a real option given the punishment for doing so, were they even able to make it back home at this point. As such, Legatus's legion falls and Estacado makes plans to march with his tribe to Rome.
Number 8. Ogon Bat. Okay, Ogon Bat is a unique and cool character in his own right, but he was also one of the world's first superheroes ever, even technically coming before Superman. Originating from Japan as the god of justice and protector of the weak, his origin is that he was originally an Atlantean who was sent forward in time 10,000 years to defend the modern world from evil. He wields a scepter that fires bolts of energy, causes many earthquakes, and slices through steel. He himself was immortal, could fly, breathe underwater, had X-ray vision, and possessed superhuman strength, speed, and invulnerability to bullets and lasers. He was summoned by a little girl who would call on him, causing a sparkle to appear around, which then turned into a bat and then turned into the hero when it's found its enemy. It's very weird, but we just roll with it. While he initially started as a comic, he also has a TV show that appeared in several different countries outside of Japan, and I think he looks really cool. So, yeah.
Number 7. Cosmic Ghost Rider. Cosmic Ghost Rider is an interesting one. While I initially thought of the prehistoric Ghost Rider, Ghost, when it came to old Ghost Riders, I realized that despite being from an alternate future, Cosmic Ghost Rider is also ancient. But you know, future ancient. Cosmic Ghost Rider is the spirit of Frank Castle, who ends up becoming the spirit of vengeance after he is killed during Thanos' invasion of Earth. In this version of the story, Thanos succeeds in basically destroying Earth, and by the time Frank returns as Ghost Rider to the planet's surface, it's kinda too late for him to save his friends. He ends up alone on the planet, and after years and years of solitude with no one left to avenge, becomes, well, insane, as I think pretty much almost anyone would. Despite eventually becoming Thanos' herald, CGR is really doing his best to be a good guy. He only ever really even joined up with Thanos because, you know, well, there was no one left and he didn't want to be alone. Before even joining up with Thanos, Cosmic Ghost Rider did attempt to get his revenge on the Mad Titan, teaming up with Galactus, but even Galactus fell in this fight against this alternate King Thanos. Number 6. Nubia. Nubia is possibly even older than most other Amazons, who are generally known for being old and immortal just standardly. In Infinite Frontier, her story was retconned so that she was no longer a woman held and mistreated against her will for a long time, but a princess reborn in the Well of Souls. Nubia was born from the Well of Souls reincarnated around the same time that Princess Diana was born, and the two grew up often being thought of as sisters. And if you're wondering why I was mentioning that she might be older than some of the other Amazons, that's just because she's reincarnated. So although Nubia in her own form is around the same age as Diana, she also got an old soul, you know what I mean? She would spend many years as the guardian of Doom's doorway, and would act as a loyal supporter to Queen Hippolyta, even when it seemed that she had betrayed her. In fact, Nubia's loyalty to the Amazons in the current continuity has not failed, and she even recently was chosen to be the new queen of the Amazons. And we're not just talking about the Amazons of Themyscira either, but in fact all known Amazons in existence, as there are actually multiple Amazonian tribes in existence throughout the world.
Number 5. Exodus. Grand Duke Benny du Perry was a 12th century nobleman from medieval France in Marvel Comics. Does that count as ancient? I don't know anyone who's around then, so I'm taking it and running with it. What are you gonna do about it? Nothing, because I'm just an image on your screen. As an adult, Benet was a crusader for the Knights Templar sent to Jerusalem during the Crusades, and he even became best friends with Eobar Garrington, aka the Black Knight of that era. The two had set out on a quest to find the Tower of Power, which is a stupid name, when his abilities manifested after an encounter with the Phoenix Force, which were then improved further thanks to the mutant apocalypse. But thanks to Big Blue, Exodus was trapped in a tomb until the modern day, when he was awoken by Magneto and joined his cause. Exodus is one of the most powerful psionic mutants in existence, with such a pristine use of telekinesis and telepathy that he can even alter electrons and molecules. His power is so strong that Marvel even had to debuff him by making his powers dependent on his or others' level of faith in this mutant, although he still regularly kicks some serious series, but
At number 4 is Agamotto. Now, speaking of ancient superheroes, let's uncover a figure whose power and influence might just leave you spellbound. No, he's not your everyday magician pulling rabbits out of hats. We're talking about the cosmic conjurer who would give Doctor Strange a run for his money. Imagine being tutored by a deity, Oshurdur no less, the literal elder goddess of Earth. But Agamotto wasn't just a student, he went on to become Earth's very first Sorcerer Supreme. Agamotto would go on to face cosmic threats like the Fallen, and yes, even Dormammu, which he thwarted alongside the Stone Age Avengers. Now let's talk artifact. The legend of Agamotto was like an Indiana Jones fever dream, as he'd created magical treasures that would make a dragon's hoard look like pocket change. First off, we got the eyes, that's right, eyes plural, of Agamotto. You might remember one of those as the pendant in Doctor Strange's possession that guards the Time Stone. Well, Agamotto made not one, not two, but 3 of them bad boys. But their intended purpose wasn't meant to guard Infinity Stones or serve as reading glasses. These peepers could pierce through dimensions, unlocking knowledge that could make Google's search engine blush. Ever heard of the Book of Vishanti? Yup, that was Agamotto's brainchild too, an enchanted book that's like Wikipedia but for spells. Agamotto went from being a mere mortal sorcerer supreme to being a bona fide higher being, a principality. Essentially, imagine a being so magically advanced that you become a go-to power source for other sorcerers, sort of like being the neighborhood electrician for the mystical realm. So there you have it, Agamotto, the ancient superhero who wasn't just reading spells from a dusty book, he was writing them into that dusty book, shaping the very fabric of reality, defending Earth from cosmic threats, and leaving behind a trail of magical breadcrumbs for future sorcerers to follow.
Number 3, Starbrand Vin. The Starbrand itself is an incredible source of power, proven by other people who have wielded it. The bearer of Earth 723's Starbrand used the power to create music that influenced human behavior to the extent that he has unified the people of his world as a single hive mind. Earth 541 is the home of a Starbrand bearer who has conquered his world and installed himself as the head of a benevolent monarchical dictatorship, but like a good one that actually somehow works despite the lack of freedoms. Thing is, what the Starbrand is capable of is dependent on its wielder's imagination. When it first showed up on Earth, it was millions and millions of years ago, coming down with a meteor that wiped out the dinosaurs, but in doing so, it bonded itself to a Tyrannosaurus Rex, which is absolutely awesome. After a few millions of years though, that T-Rex had gone belly up, and the Starbrand found a new bearer in the form of a caveman named Vin. It's just VNN, I don't know why it's pronounced like that. Interestingly though, when Vin came upon the Starbrand and used it to join up with the Avengers 1 million BC, he was actually more analogous to like the Hulk, at least in his looks, and he had a more primitive use of the Starbrand than other future bearers. But he did live on the moon for a bit and help fight a Celestial, so don't get it twisted, he did more than just punch stuff.
At number 2 is the first Black Panther. Meet Mosi, a member of the Black Panther tribe in the legendary land of Wakanda. Now, he wasn't the first of his tribe to munch on the heart-shaped herb, but he was the first to survive the experience as he caught the attention of a powerful entity known as Bast, the Panther Spirit. And let me tell you folks, that wasn't your ordinary herbal experience. We're in ancient Wakanda after all, not modern Canada. With Bast's blessing, Mosi became the very first Black Panther. Talk about leveling up. It was around this time that Earth was dealing with some cosmic turbulence courtesy of a meteor from the Vega system. The rifts it opened up started inviting all sorts of extraterrestrial nasties, like the Brood, to the neighborhood. Not one to let his tribe become an all-you-can-eat buffet for these cosmic creeps, Mosi stepped in as Wakanda's defender-in-chief. And guess who else decided to crash the party? None other than Odin Borison, the Asgardian bigwig himself. Now, Odin wasn't exactly known for tossing around compliments like confetti, but he had to admit he was pretty darn impressed with Mosi's moral moxie. And if that wasn't enough, get this, Mosi was the first person after Odin to ever lift Mjolnir, proving his worthiness during the first encounter with the rest of the Stone Age Avengers. Mosi and his crew sealed away a colossal celestial, saving the day like it was just another Wednesday. They faced off against cosmic villains like Mephisto and Shumagora, making your average supervillain seem about as threatening as a fluffy kitten. But alas, all good things must come to an end. Mosi met his match in a battle against the children of Laufey and Hive, and his sacrifice marked the end of this ancient Avengers era. The team disbanded with Mosi's demise, and also caused the Wakandan people to retreat from the outside world, requesting that the Avengers forget their existence. The nation would then segment into tribes and were not reunited again until the rise of the second Black Panther, Alumo Bashenga.
And finally, in at number 1 today is Mr. Majestic. DC Comics' Mr. Majestic, also known as Magistros, is a character of immense power and capability that often surprises readers with the extent of his abilities. Hailing from an advanced alien race known as the Caribim, Majestic possesses superhuman strength, speed, speed and durability that rivals even the mightiest of superheroes. Unlike the lesser cast, however, he is a cherubim of Imperial blood, meaning he has a host of cosmic tier physical and mental abilities. Majestic has demonstrated the power to manipulate matter and energy at a molecular level, able to discharge any manner of energy he has on hand however he sees fit, rearranging the subatomic structure of objects, or charging his fists with energy to increase his punching strength. Speaking of strength though, he has rearranged most of the planets in the solar system by just pushing them from his own power, and has crushed graphite into diamonds in order to pay for a meal, which those two things are very, very different. On top of all of that though, Majestic is basically Wildstorm's analog for Superman and shares a lot of the same abilities as the Man of Steel. And when interacting with the rest of the DC multiverse, he's considered to be an alternate Earth Superman. Oh, and he makes this list because, being a cherubim, he is about 10,000. Starting off our list at number 10 is Xena, Warrior Princess. I bet you didn't expect to see this one. Sure, Xena Warrior Princess started out as a TV show, but the character was popular enough to get a few comic book series all of her own. From bigger publishers too, like Dark Horse and Dynamite Comics. Way back in the day, in her early 20s, Xena proved to be a courageous leader when she led her village against a local warlord. But they were defeated, and Xena, being one of the only survivors, was banished. Eventually, she formed a relationship with another warlord known as Boreas, and she even joined him, becoming a warlord herself. Xena the Warlord became known and feared across ancient China, Siberia, Japan, Norway, Britannia, and Greece as a very capable warlord, earning her the name Warrior Princess, but also the name Destroyer of Nations. Luckily, this destroyer changed her ways and instead became a protector of the innocent, traveling with her companions all across the ancient world. Number 9. Hippolyta. This queen's history begins thousands of years ago. Around 1300 BC, the Greek pantheon held a meeting convened by the goddesses. They were discussing the creation of a race of humans that would champion their ideals. Now the male gods, including Zeus and Ares, did not seem too interested, and Hera did not wish to go against her husband, so it was left to the other 5 primary Greek goddesses. They decided to travel into the underworld, where they came upon the Well of Souls, where the souls of all the women who were taken out by man's hatred were gathered. The goddesses took these souls and went and dropped them into a lake in Greece. The souls mixed with the clay and the stone of the lake bed to form the Amazons, and the first one to emerge from the waters was Hippolyta. The goddesses appointed Hippolyta to be queen, and they decreed that the Amazons were to spread the message of peace, tolerance, and equality by being super dope warriors. Yes, Wonder Woman is also pretty ancient too, but Mama came first, so here we are. Number 8. Black Adam. Okay, so there are 2 different main origin stories for Black Adam. In the pre-New 52 era of DC, circa 1200 BC, the wizard Shazam became a high priest to the pharaoh Ramses II of Egypt. This is where he met the young prince Teth Adam of Kahndaq. Teth Adam was Ramses' son. Teth Adam impressed the wizard with his fairness and decency, and boom, he was granted the power. But in the more recent continuity, Teth Adam was born in Egypt in the 26th century BCE along the banks of the Nile as part of the Kahndaqi tribe, and it didn't take too long for him to be forced into a life of unwilling servitude. His entire family lost their lives except for his nephew Ammon. Ammon would save Teth Adam's life, which got him the recognition of the wizard Shazam, who turned Ammon into his champion. Ammon shared this power with his uncle Teth Adam, but not seeing eye to eye on how to use the power, Black Adam took his own nephew off the board and stole his power. This was way before he was either banished, stuck in a scarab, or locked away in a tomb, depending on which era you want to talk about. Also, for the trolls out there, I know Adam is primarily a villain, but he has also been a hero, even joining the Justice Society and the Justice League, so get off my back.
Number 7. Skrulls. The Skrulls have been a part of the comic book universe for a long time, and while some of them have become heroes in recent years, they were initially introduced as villains. In the second issue of Fantastic Four, they were portrayed as an alien race with designs for world domination, hoping to conquer Earth by infiltrating it and basically posing as the Fantastic Four, committing evil deeds. Their goal was to discredit the Fantastic Four and have the FF's own national government and military capture and eliminate them. See, because then Earth would have no protectors and they'd be able to take it for themselves. Look, this was early days of comics, so everyone else wasn't really as prominent yet. However, the FF managed to capture the Skrull impersonators and posed as them instead, causing the Skrull leader to call off the invasion. They did a little switcheroo there. They were like, we see your plan and we will do it, but we will do it better. In the end, the Skrulls who posed as the FF were left behind and took the form of cows, living in apparent peace on the planet's surface, but isolated from their homeworld and of course their people. Although they didn't seem to mind, I think they were pretty happy as cows. As we saw alluded to in the MCU's Secret Invasion, Skrulls can actually live for hundreds of years, and in the comics their empire has existed for tens of millions of years. Despite them losing that battle though, the Skrulls would not give up on Earth and years later would almost claim it for themselves during the comic book Secret Invasion event, where they were led by the Skrull Queen, Varanki. Number 6. Darkseid. Darkseid is a powerful and formidable villain in the DC Comics universe, ruling over Apocalypse with an army of loyal soldiers known as the Parademons. Despite facing challenges and battles against numerous heroes and villains, Darkseid has managed to defeat many of them, including seemingly defeating the entirety of the Justice League on multiple occasions. What sets Darkseid apart from other villains is his sense of inevitability and unstoppable power. This is illustrated by the catchphrase "Darkseid is," which has become iconic in comic book history and was coined by Grant Morrison. The phrase "Darkseid is" basically means that Darkseid is inevitable and all-powerful. You don't have to finish the sentence because he just is. He is an evil constant who must and will always exist, a terrifying thought when you've experienced firsthand his brutal power and iron will. Darkseid's immense strength and ruthless army make him a terrifying and honestly unforgettable villain. Number 5. Raquel. Sure, Raquel might be in prison currently, or at least that's where she was put at the end of the Empire event last I checked, but that doesn't mean she is down and out for the count. Au contraire. Instead, it simply means that she's likely biding her time and she's eventually once more going to attempt to do something to manipulate her grandson further into unifying and dominating other worlds, as she orchestrated the fusion of the Kree and Skrull together with the Kree-Skrull alliance. And if I've missed anything here and she's doing something else or she was eliminated, trust me, I do not think she's eliminated. For years we thought she had perished along with the rest of her people when her world was destroyed by Galactus, and for years we were apparently wrong in this. What's to stop her from surprising us yet again, you know what I mean? Number 4. Mandrak the Dark Monitor. Mandrak was once, or is, depending on what you believe, Dax Novu. And Dax Novu was once a part of the Monitor. Following the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths, the injuries the Monitor had suffered caused it to basically splinter apart somewhat, dividing its body and creating other smaller monitors. Dax Novu was one of these monitors. He eventually realized that the monitors were parasitic beings who were feeding on the energies of the multiverse, slowly consuming and destroying it. He informed the other monitors but was basically shunned for attempting to share his realization, and this is pretty much what turned him, well, dark. Dax then became corrupted, turning into a dark monitor known as Mandrak. Number 3. Thulsa Doom. Conan, the famous barbarian created by Robert E. Howard, has faced many powerful enemies on his adventures. However, he often finds himself in epic battles against evil sorcerers and wizards, as so many barbarians from that age of comics do. One of his most well-known foes, Thulsa Doom, is a necromancer who uses dark magic to achieve his wicked goals. Thulsa Doom made his first comic book appearance way back in Monsters on the Prowl issue number 16 in terms of the comics. Interestingly, Thulsa Doom was originally created as a villain for Robert E. Howard's other barbarian hero, Kull of Atlantis, who was considered by some to be a more complex and well-rounded character than Conan was. However, Thulsa Doom's appearance as the main antagonist in the 1982 film Conan the Barbarian solidified his place in popular culture as one of Conan's greatest enemies, and so that's how we see him today. Number 2. Apocalypse. There is a whole reality based on the question of what would happen if Apocalypse was basically unable to be stopped. This reality is known as Earth 295, aka the Age of Apocalypse, or AOA if you will. And in this world, Apocalypse becomes pretty much inevitable thanks to the early demise of one man, Charles Xavier, Professor X. The reality of Age of Apocalypse just goes to show you what a force Apocalypse is, and if an alternate reality where Apocalypse literally rules the world is somehow not enough to convince you of how unstoppable this villain can be, you can also turn to the more recent X-Men event 10 of Swords, which happened a few years ago, aka the Otherworld Tournament. During this fight, Apocalypse faced his wife, who was possessed by Annihilation, and even against the seemingly unbeatable foe that was Annihilation, who can pretty much never lose, Apocalypse managed to win, saving his wife and freeing her from the influence of the Golden Helm, while also saving basically all of Krakoa, Mutant Kind, and Otherworld. Yeah, so this wasn't his most villainous moment. But normally Apocalypse is a villain, and this just serves as another example to show you how he basically can't be stopped. Number 1. Great Darkness. The Great Darkness is in essence one of the oldest evils in the DC multiverse. In the beginning, it was said there was only darkness. However, a small light was also created and eventually it grew. When the creator said, "Let there be light," the darkness was forced to shy away and retreat, but its screams of protest left a mark on the light, a flaw, which is believed to basically have become the DC multiverse. At one point, a cult attempted to reawaken the Great Darkness and use it as a weapon to destroy God and reshape all of existence. This created a divide, with various beings allying themselves with the Great Darkness, fighting on the side of hell, while others worked to oppose the entity, allying themselves with the side of heaven, the side of light, if you will. The Great Darkness has long been tied to the stories of heroes like Swamp Thing and John Constantine, making its first appearance in the Swamp Thing series from 1982.
Coming in at number 10 today is the Silver Surfer. The Surfer was originally Norrin Radd, an astronomer from the planet Zen-La. When Radd discovered that Galactus, the Devourer of Worlds, had come to devour Zen-La's life force, Radd struck a deal with the cosmic entity to seek out uninhabited planets that Galactus could consume. Eventually, Galactus became aware of Earth, our little green planet, and he set out to make it his next meal. The Surfer arrived just in time to warn the Fantastic Four of Galactus' arrival, which was his initial reveal into the universe of Marvel Comics in Fantastic Four number 48 to number 50. And that started a great relationship between the Surfer and the superhero family. The Silver Surfer's adventures often center on philosophical conundrums as much as physical challenges, and Stan Lee has used the Surfer as a vessel to express some of the writer's own worldviews. But why is he on the list of ancient heroes? Well, we don't actually have a specific birth year for Norrin Radd, but the Silver Surfer himself has stated that it has been a millennia since he was first transformed by Galactus, and he was a mature member of his species when that happened. And that species is a long-lived one, so it's very safe to say that the Silver Surfer is quite old indeed. Number 9. Mystique. To some of us humans, hundreds of years ago feels just as ancient as millions of years ago. Maybe. The Marvel mutant known as Mystique, while you wouldn't think it, has stated that she was not born in the last century and that she's actually over 100 years old. Mystique has a very complex and unrevealed origin. Like, Marvel started by introducing her and have only given us brief moments where she has shown up in the timeline prior to that. So, this point is more so cobbling together various things she and others has said that point to her being quite freaking old. Mystique has been known to be with her wife, Destiny, by 1895, and she stated that, quote, "Solitude was my natural state for 100 years, which basically implies that she was born before 1800. In 1921, she met Logan in Kansas City and they all worked together in Scotland shortly before World War II, but in an early appearance in Uncanny X-Men number 170, Mystique dreamt that she was in the year 1783, which is specified as being 170 years before her birth. As the comic was published in 1983, this would make her 30 years old at the time of the story, but that has since been retconned. So as I said, it's a little convoluted. Despite the fact that it is unknown when exactly she was born, it can be assumed that Mystique was born in the month of September, because apparently her birthstone is a sapphire. Twinning. While she might not be as ancient as others on this list, she is still much older than you think and an incredibly hard mutant to bring down. Number 7. X-O Manowar. In the world of Valiant Comics' X-O Manowar, a long time ago, aka 402 AD, a barbarian tribe known as the Visigoths were battling the Romans for territory in Italy. One of these barbarians was Eric of Dacia, a warrior of the Visigoths and the nephew of the king. After the Romans sneakily captured the barbarian women, and children, Eric gathered together a group of warriors and went off to attack the Romans at night. On their way to the Roman stronghold though, the Visigoths came across strangely dressed warriors who turned out to be an alien species known as the Vine. Using their advanced weapons, the Vine easily defeated the barbarians and the remaining Visigoths were taken aboard the alien mothership. Now, whilst being herded on board the ship, Eric and his friends managed to overpower their jailer and escape to find shelter within another area of the ship where they witnessed a Vine ritual in which a priest presented a chosen warrior with a semi-sentient armor called Shanhara. After a number of years, Eric and the others finally managed to gather enough tools and escape their cages. They made their way to the armory where they found themselves trapped by Commander Trill and his soldiers, but in what could have been their final moments, Shanhara had deemed Eric worthy, granting him superhuman abilities and the means to escape his captors, eventually becoming a hero in the modern era. Number 6. Valkyrie. There have been a few people to take up the role of Valkyrie, but the first was Brunhilde. Back in the day, Odin realized that he needed to give man a paradise to live in after passing on. Thank you. Odin chose a princess named Brunhilde to be his Valkyrie, making her responsible for taking the souls of the warriors who perished in battle with honor and bringing them to Valhalla. Brunhilde led the rest of the Valkyrie as a group of warrior goddesses who would appear over the battlefields of mortal worshippers of the Asgardian gods and choose which of them were worthy to be taken to Valhalla. Brunhilde led this group for centuries. Like the other Asgardians, Brunhilde had godly powers, but she also possessed some Valkyrie-specific traits like the ability to perceive and sense the coming of death on a person, the power to teleport to Asgard through willpower, and she was one of the most capable fighters the Asgardians had to offer outside of Thor and maybe a few others.
Number 5, Dormammu. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, I've come to bargain. Dormammu, yeah, you get it. You saw the movie, you know what I'm doing. Doctor Strange's greatest nemesis is also one of the most powerful ancient evils in the Marvel Universe across the multiverse. Ruler of the Dark Dimension, Dormammu is an interdimensional entity capable of existing for eons, capable of all sorts of impressive magical feats like conjuration, being able to summon creatures under his dominion, even bending the law of physics to his will. Dormammu is already crazy strong, but it's only amplified more if he's in the Dark Dimension, his home turf. Now he doesn't just get a home field advantage by being there because the sun's not in his eyes. He's able to siphon energy directly from the Dark Dimension to fuel himself, as well as draining his followers for their energy. Dormammu is the perfect foil for a hero like Doctor Strange, an incredibly powerful, omnipotent being who can't be defeated outright with traditional brawls or fisticuffs and needs to be outsmarted and outmaneuvered. Luckily, the Sorcerer Supreme usually has a handle on it. Usually.
Number 4, the Chaos King. The entity known as Amatsu Mikubashi originally was portrayed as the Japanese god of evil, but in actuality, he was an offshoot of Oblivion, the cosmic entity embodying the void that existed before the universe began. Because of course he was. An incarnation of the primordial darkness and chaos that existed before the universe, the Chaos King exists as a dark counterpart to the cosmic being Eternity. That by itself makes Amatsu an incredibly powerful being on a cosmic level. In a mission to bring everything to chaos, he started waging war on all the gods of every pantheon in the universe, and he actually did defeat and take control of almost all of them. It took a combined effort of heroes plus Hercules, who was amped up to incredibly insane godlike levels, to take him down in the Chaos War storyline. Absolutely check it out if you haven't already, it's fantastic.
Number 3, Mephisto. If you're not a big comics fan, maybe you recognize the name Mephisto from countless Reddit threads and headlines saying he'd be appearing in the next episode of WandaVision somewhere. Remember how convinced we all were? Simpler days. So just who is Mephisto actually? Well, basically for all intents and purposes, he's the Marvel Comics version of Satan. Where things get incredibly confusing is that he's not actually Satan, because that's a separate character in the Marvel Universe, but he's his own evil, powerful entity, and boy is he that. Mephisto is a long-standing evil, responsible for a lot of some of the biggest suffering in the Marvel Universe. He captured Doctor Doom's mother's soul, he bonded Johnny Blaze to the Ghost Rider, and those are just some of his lesser feats. Mephisto is capable of full-scale reality alteration, like when he infamously changed the entire Marvel timeline to erase Peter and Mary Jane's marriage in exchange for healing Aunt May. Also, he could nip a timeline in the bud where he was defeated by Spider-Man's daughter. You gotta respect that level of pettiness. He hasn't shown up in the MCU yet, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's coming soon. Just give it some time. One more day, maybe.
And in at number 2 is Sidorak. Sidorak, also known as the Destroyer, Lord of Oblivion, and Master of the Raging Storm, is an immensely powerful extra-dimensional being hailing from the Crimson Cosmos. He was worshipped as a god and a demon by the primitive humans of Earth until he was banished back to the Crimson Cosmos. As the Destroyer, Sidorak's main goal is to just cause destruction and raise destructive power. To do this from the Crimson Cosmos, and also to win a wager with 8 other deities like himself, he created the Crimson Gem of Sidorak, which allows him to select a person to be his avatar, enhancing them to become the indestructible and immortal Juggernaut, like Cain, Marco, and the other avatars. Now, if you pay close attention to the magic wielders in the Marvel Universe, particularly Doctor Strange, you will hear them invoking Sidorak's name to cast some of their strongest spells. For example, the Crimson Bands of Sidorak. He doesn't really show up a lot in the pages of Marvel Comics, but when he does, it's always as this super imposing, terrible force.
And And finally, coming in at the #1 spot, well, it only made sense to have this below everyone else, the one below all. Yeah. Kind of hard to top that. The one below all is the dark side of the one above all, the highest form of creation in the Marvel multiverse. If the one above all is the embodiment of all the compassion and love that exists out there, well then the one below is the opposite of that and the beautiful embodiment of all the hatred and rage that's inside us all. It's a bit of an eldritch creature existing in the lowest points of reality, you know, below all, quite literally, it's in the name. It's responsible for all the gamma radiation in the world, as this is how it manifests itself throughout the multiverse. All of Hulk's rage and anger stems from drops of hatred of the one below all, just a tiny fraction of what it could be capable of. The one below all has existed before the multiverse, the universe itself even, and is thought to ultimately be the harbinger of all evil that's ever manifested in the Marvel universe. Considering how much darkness, how much hate, how much evil exists out there, that's gotta count for something. Mephisto was unable to thwart the one below all, saying it was more powerful than he was. Bruce Banner theorized that no, God of the Symbiotes was just another avatar of the one below all, meaning when it comes to ultimate evil, it's kinda hard to top something below it all.
At number 10, we have Ancient Ghost Rider. Ghost Rider on a freaking mammoth? Are you kidding me? Back when Earth was an untamed land inhabited by tribes of cavemen, the young boy who would become the first Ghost Rider was brilliant among his pack, but he kept this to himself, fearing isolation. One day, a strange man confronts the tribe, swiftly becoming the leader of their pack through violent means, and eventually revealing himself to be a Wendigo before devouring the entire tribe, save for the young boy. Before the Wendigo leaves, he names the boy Ghost and challenges the boy to find him. With everyone he'd ever known gone, Ghost ventures beyond his cave, deciding that if the stranger could survive out there in the world, so could he. Ghost then embarks on a quest to survive and find his newfound adversary. Alone in a new turbulent environment, Ghost nearly succumbs to exhaustion, but at that moment he's approached by a talking serpent who bestows upon Ghost the spirit of vengeance as a means of achieving his goal, transforming him to the very first Ghost Rider. Fast forward 5 years and the stage is set for a showdown. Ghost, on the back of a flaming mammoth, confronts the Wendigo, engaging in a battle that ends with the Wendigo pushing Ghost atop the mammoth off a cliff, a fall that only the rider would survive. Alone once more, the Ghost was approached by Odin and Lady Phoenix, who would ask him to join the prehistoric Avengers. By the way, if Ghost Rider on a mammoth isn't cool enough for you, then try the Ghost Rider of the Hyborian Age about 990,000 years later, when the Ghost Rider of that era rode a giant spider. The Spider Rider would go on to confront Conan the Barbarian, and while we don't know how that showdown ends, you can definitely bet it would be a battle of the ages. Well, the Hyborian Age specifically. And speaking of which...
Number 9, Conan the Barbarian. Conan was born on a carnage-strewn battlefield in the hills of the westernmost region of Chimeria, all the way back in the Hyborian Age, aka around 13 to 10,000 BC. The fact that Conan was born on a battlefield was considered to be an omen that Conan would grow up to be a great warrior one day. And Conan was one of the most accomplished swordsmen of the Hyborian Age. He has unusually high strength, agility, and speed for a human. He has lifted immense objects or enemies, even using his bare hands to bring down a raging bull when he was still relatively young. It's said that he has the strength equivalent of 10 to 20 men. More often than not though, Conan relies upon his lightning fast reflexes in combat situations, and they've very rarely failed him. On top of that, he has a massive level of durability, and through years of dealing with sorcerers, magicians, and witches, he has even developed a moderate level of resistance to magic and mind control spells. Conan is a master warrior. He has a hardy survival instinct, is a master of stealth, and is multilingual. While primarily known as a wandering sellsword, Conan progressively became a master tactician, leading entire armies into battle, and eventually Conan even became king of Aquilonia, wherever that is, and also eventually a hero interacting with the heroes of the modern day.
If you're enjoying the videos so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. Moving on to number 8, we have Odin Borson. Wait, did any of you guys know that the Allfather's last name is Borson? Just me? Okay. Odin, born from the union of Bor, the son of Buri, and Besla, a giantess, emerged alongside his brothers Kul, Vilai, and Vis. I definitely butchered that, I'm so sorry. Together, these divine siblings embarked on a cosmic odyssey that would reshape reality itself. They dared to challenge Ymir, the frost giant, forging the very fabric of the cosmos and existence itself from Ymir's remains. Asgard, the celestial realm, blossomed from the remnants of Ymir, becoming the abode of gods in the heart of their dominion. Yet Odin's exploits were not limited to creation alone. One day, a sentient and all-powerful storm known as the God Tempest threatened the sanctity of Asgard. Odin, as mighty as the storm was, stood resolute against its fury, and with a display of power that echoed through the cosmos, Odin quelled the tempest, imprisoning its essence within within a fragment of Uru, which would one day become the legendary Mjolnir, a symbol of power and worthiness. Sometime after forging Mjolnir, but long before the birth of Thor, Odin descended upon Midgard, then known as Aesheim, where he bestowed upon the world the gift of humanity. However, even the god's benevolence can be tempered with enigmatic purpose. Bor, his father, was not entirely pleased with Odin's creation, casting upon humanity the mantle of suffering. As eons swept by, Odin's saga intertwined with the Stone Age. See, Mjolnir proved difficult to wield, leading Odin to forge an alliance with mystically empowered prehistoric humans. Together they united as the Stone Age Avengers, the guardians of Earth's fragile yet flourishing existence.
Number 8. Nabu. Dr. Fate is one of the most powerful magic users in DC Comics, but funnily enough, Dr. Fate is just a name used by the wearers of the Helmet of Fate, which was created by the powerful sorcerer Nabu. Nabu is actually billions of years old as one of the cosmic beings known as the Lords of Order. They came into being at the beginning of the universe and struggled with the Lords of Chaos for supremacy. The Lords of Order actually manifested themselves as the first sentient race in the universe, but it wasn't until 3500 BC, in Earth years, that one of the Lords of Order descended to Earth and became Nabu the Wise, an advisor to the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. In the New 52 continuity, he is a bit more human and credited as one of the first discoverers of magic, but regardless, after years and years and years serving pharaohs, Nabu did eventually, quote, pass on, or it's more so that his physical body could no longer contain him, and so his spirit was absorbed into magical items, mainly the Helmet of Fate, allowing him to live on through it and whoever puts the helmet on their head. Number 7. The Wizard. Mamaragan, or the Wizard, or just Shazam's origin story is deeply rooted in ancient mysticism and magic. He was an ancient wizard who once belonged to an order known as the Council of Eternity, sworn to safeguard the realms from supernatural threats. Thousands of years ago, during the days of ancient Egypt, Mamaragan was granted incredible magical powers tied to the 6 gods of Solomon, Hercules, Atlas, Zeus, Achilles, and Mercury. As the wielder of the magic word Shazam, Mamaragan could channel the combined abilities of the 6 figures, bestowing those powers upon a worthy champion. However, when his first champion, Teth Adam, aka Black Adam, fell to darkness, Mamaragan sealed the powers away for centuries. In the modern era, Mamaragan's essence endured, choosing the young Billy Batson as his new champion. When Billy utters the word Shazam, he transforms into the superhero Shazam, embodying the collective powers that Mamaragan once held. Mamaragan's origin story is a tapestry of ancient magic, responsibility, and the passing of the torch to a new generation of heroes who carry his legacy in the form of Shazam. He was a hero, but has kind of become something much more important. Number 6. Hercules. Hercules is the son of Zeus, Skyfather and supreme ruler of the gods of Olympus, and Alcmena, a mortal woman who lived over 3,000 years ago. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, arranged for her father Zeus to have a half-mortal son to be the world's champion. Zeus seduced the mortal queen Alcmena, pretending to be her husband, King Amphitryon, I think is how you pronounce that, and Alcmena gave birth to the baby Hercules. Now, as an adult demigod in ancient Greece, Hercules achieved worldwide fame as he became the greatest hero of the ancient world, best known for his 12 labors. As the Olympian god of strength as well, Hercules' strength is unlimited, making him one of the strongest and most powerful heroes in the Marvel universe. As an infant, he was breastfed by his stepmother, Hera, queen of the Olympian gods, which increased his already demigod physiology to a godlike level. Hercules possesses the superhuman physical attributes of an Olympian god, but interestingly, some of his powers are superior to the vast majority of his own race. Most recently though, he is a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but he has also been a part of the Avengers, the God Squad, the Council of Godheads, the Mighty Avengers, the Secret Avengers, the Defenders, the Heroes for Hire, and of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. Number 5. Anthro. Created by Howard Post, Anthro is considered the first boy on Earth, existing in prehistoric times. He lived with his family during a period when the world was still in its primal stages. Anthro's curiosity and adaptability drove him to explore the challenges and mysteries of a world populated by both primitive creatures and nascent human tribes. Through his adventures, Anthro unwittingly played a significant role in shaping humanity's development and survival, often making use of his ingenuity and courage to overcome obstacles, while also being a part of some some modern age stories thanks to time travel. He's popped up in Crisis on Infinite Earths, Armageddon 2001, Zero Hour, Team 13, and Final Crisis, and he's even been to the Marvel Universe where he interacted with Devil Dinosaur. Anthro's narrative explores the struggle for survival, the emergence of intelligence, and the foundation of human civilization. His story reflects the essence of human curiosity, resilience, and the quest for progress, serving as a symbol of humanity's earliest steps into the unknown. His powers are, well, pretty much non-existent, but he has played a part in some big events and in more than just a background kind of way. Number 4, the Ancient One. Born over 1,000 years ago, the Ancient One, otherwise known as Yao, was a local to the Tibetan ancient city of Kamar-Taj. Under the guidance of the mystic sorcerer Kalu, Yao delved into the ancient arts of magic and arcane wisdom, eventually surpassing and even facing his mentor. After facing his mentor, granting himself long life, and fighting alongside sorcerer supremes throughout time, he sought out an order of ancient magic users known as the Ancient Ones in order to devote his entire life to their goal of combating evil sorcerers. The youth eventually became even more skilled than his colleagues though, and grew in power so great that he was the first mortal ever of Earth to meet with Eternity, the sentient embodiment of the universe, who presented him with the Amulet of Agamotto and charged him to become their Earth's Dimension's Sorcerer Supreme. After spending a ton of time trying to sculpt a successor and having multiple possible choices, Yao eventually passed on and left the Sorcerer Supreme mantle to Dr. Stephen Strange. Number 3, I, Vampire. Vampires in DC Comics are practically indestructible and can regenerate any damage done by consuming blood. They have superhuman strength, speed, reflexes, stamina, can transform into bats, wolves, rats, and mist, and have enhanced senses and a bit of psychokinesis. But despite that, they do have some major weaknesses that pretty much everyone is aware of, with a big one being the frickin' sun, unless they can find a way to temporarily make themselves immune. But for I, Vampire, otherwise known as Andrew Bennett, the former 16th century English nobleman in Queen Elizabeth's court, he has a peculiar ability to eventually automatically revive himself after he is sent to the grave, even if he becomes a pile of ashes from the sun. He has even survived the end of the universe. I don't know how that's possible. The ability is a bit of a mystery even to Bennett himself. When he survived the end of the universe, it was at the will of the presence, leaving some to believe that this may be true in all cases, but that's not actually confirmed. Whatever the reason, it has allowed him to survive as a heroic vegetarian vampire all the way until the modern day. Number 2, Dream. The Endless, featured in DC's Sandman story, is a group of 7 siblings: death, destiny, despair, desire, delirium, destruction, and the focus of our point today, Dream. These siblings represent fundamental aspects and forces of the Vertigo/DC universe, and they are all immortal, ageless, and nigh omnipotent. The parents of the Endless were revealed to be the embodiment of Time, father of the Endless, and Night, the embodiment of the infinite darkness that existed before the dawn of the universe, and the mother of the Endless. So, it's safe to say that these beings are probably pretty ancient. Like 10 billion years ancient. They came from the beginning of the universe. As for Dream, or Morpheus, he isn't so much a superhero as we are used to, but he is an extremely powerful, reluctant hero, and his journey to that status from emotionless god to a being displaying very human-like emotions and characteristics is the fundamental story of the Sandman. Dream dwells in a realm called the Dreaming, from where he controlled the fundamental concept of fantasy and reality in the universe, as the line between the waking world and the dreams is quite thin. And in at number 1 today, it's Hippolyta. This queen's history begins thousands of years ago, around 1300 BC. The Greek pantheon held a meeting convened by the goddesses. They were discussing the creation of a race of humans that would champion their ideals. The male gods, including Zeus and Ares, did not seem interested in this, and Hera did not wish to go against her husband, so it was left to the other primary female Greek goddesses. They decided to travel into the underworld, where they came upon the Well of Souls, where the souls of all the women murdered by men's hatred were gathered together. The goddesses took these souls and went and dropped them into a lake in Greece. The souls mixed with the clay and the stone of the lake bed to form the Amazons, and the first one to emerge from the waters was Hippolyta. The goddesses appointed Hippolyta, or Hippolyta, however you want to pronounce it, to be queen, and they decreed that the Amazons were to spread the message of peace, tolerance, and equality by being super dope warriors. Yes, Wonder Superwoman is also pretty ancient too, but Mama came first, so here we are. Sorry.
At number 10 is Hercules. In the realm of ancient legends, Hercules emerges as the ultimate superhero. Born millennia ago to Zeus and Alcmena, his feats defy imagination. At just 1 year old, he strangled serpents sent by Hera, revealing his immense strength. He joined the Agronauts on their quest for the Golden Fleece, but never abandoned the search for his abducted friend Hylas, even at the cost of parting ways with his crew. Hercules possesses demigod-like powers, which includes immunity to aging and disease, tirelessness, superhuman strength and agility, and near invulnerability. Mortal wounds can't claim him unless they're cataclysmic, to say the least. Armed with a golden mace and other legendary weapons, he's a master of combat with the legendary reputation for romance and revelry. And with muscles like that, how could you not be a total womanizer? At number 9 is the Parliament of Trees. While the Swamp Thing is a newcomer in the vast DC universe, I mean, relatively speaking, he derives his powers from an ancient primordial force known as the Green, or the Parliament of Trees. This force intricately weaves its tendrils through every blade of grass, every towering tree, and all plant life on our planet. But the true marvel lies in the Parliament of Trees, which is a council of former plant elementals whose existence predates humanity by hundreds of millions of years. These beings have witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, outlasting even the mighty dinosaurs. Today they join forces with the Swamp Thing, an earthly avatar, to safeguard the delicate balance of our environment. In this alliance, they prove themselves as ancient superheroes, guardians of a world far older than mankind itself. If you're enjoying this video so far, you could support this channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. I would really appreciate if you did do all those things. At number 8 is Beowulf. Beowulf is a legendary Geatish king who stands as an enduring ancient superhero. His reign spanned 50 years before a dragon, harboring secrets of the Holy Grail, brought his end. James Allison speculated that his heroic tales, including the dragon battle, were imprinted in our collective memory from a past life encounter with a mysterious worm. By the way, if you're wondering, James Allison is some dude whose power is to see his past incarnations. Anyways, these stories were later transformed into an epic poem, albeit with artistic embellishments, solidifying Beowulf's place among legendary heroes. But according to Marvel Comics, Beowulf actually survived his duel against the dragon and somehow managed to live into the modern age when Beowulf resurfaced as an immortal warrior, engaging in a friendly rivalry with Theseus. He even joined a coalition of warriors led by Hercules to confront new gods seeking to overthrow the old pantheon. Beowulf's timeless saga reminds us that some heroes remain eternally captivating.
Number 7, the Immortal. Due to an accident that happened approximately 3,000 years ago, the man who became Invincible's Immortal was exposed to an unknown anomaly that gave him superhuman abilities that put him almost on par with Viltrumites, making him one of 3 known beings in the universe that can make that claim. But outside of his incredible strength, speed, durability, stamina, and flight powers, the Immortal is, you guessed it, immortal. Able to regenerate at an insanely fast rate, regrowing limbs and organs, not needing food, water, or oxygen to survive, and being immune to all poisons, toxins, venoms, viruses, bacteria, parasites, pathogens, and allergens. However, funnily enough, there is a way to, quote, kill him. If the Immortal's head is separated from his torso, it needs to be manually reattached for his healing factor to activate. But despite that, even when they aren't attached, he still remains perfectly preserved until the reattachment happens. He's been around for so long that he has been a knight, possibly under King Arthur as Lancelot, an explorer under or possibly as Christopher Columbus in the Spanish Armada. He fought in the American Revolution, became president of the United States by taking the alias of this guy you may know called Abraham Lincoln, and he fought as a soldier in the First World War. In the 1930s is when he officially became a superhero and more recently became a member of the Guardians of the Globe.
At number 6 is Phoenix. We begin with an abandoned infant named Firehair left to her own devices at a place aptly named the Burnt Place. It wasn't a cozy nursery, mind you, but a clearing where xenophobic tribes tried to sacrifice anyone who manifested appearances which strayed from their norm, in this case the child's red hair. The abandoned infant found herself being raised by an unlikely family, a pack of wolves. Wolves, the original guardians of the forest. Perhaps a canine paw father is what every superhero needs. One fateful day, Firehair's solitude was interrupted by a floating man who conversed through thoughts. No need for that pesky small talk. This floating mentor, which Firehair fondly dubbed as the High Walker, introduced her to a congregation of adopted mutants called the Tribe Without Fear, offering refuge and training. Fast forward, and Firehair's psychic abilities awakened just in time to sound the alarm about an impending attack from the xenophobes from earlier. As the High Walker faced off against the invading tribesmen, Firehair's psyche is overwhelmed by the storm of human emotion. Sadly, the High Walker meets his end while trying to calm her. Firehair fainted as her fellow pupils gave into rage and fought the attacking tribesmen, resulting in the demise of everyone present save for herself. Firehair blamed herself for her mentor and friend's demise and was overcome with despair, contemplating turning her powers on herself to unalive herself, returning to the burnt place to be eaten by buzzards. As she lay awaiting her demise, the Phoenix Force, an ancient cosmic entity with a penchant for turning planets into cinder, who had created the burnt place when it first arrived on Earth, bonds with Firehair, having been drawn to her raw and untapped psychic power. Consumed by a vengeful rage, Firehair almost gave in to the bloodlust and became a dark phoenix, but she was pacified thanks to the one who had saved her as an infant, her paw father, if you will. From that day forward, she would take a page out of the wolf playbook and decide to protect the weak rather than lay waste to the universe. Realizing the threat that beings such as herself posed to the integrity of Earth, she began assembling a team of supernatural and mystically augmented heroes to protect the nation's humanity from both outside threats and themselves, and thus founding the Avengers of the Stone Age.
Number 5. Lady Phoenix. While I did think that Phoenix was a little too on the nose for my part 1 of this list, there were some who actually requested her in the comments, so fair enough. Some people want to know more about her. And since she was featured in our thumbnail / cover photo for that first part of our list, I felt for all you loyal nerds who came to this part 2, I should oblige you and tell you more about Lady Phoenix. Who is the woman we featured on that thumb? She is also a member of the 1 million BCE Avengers, also nicknamed the Stone Age or Prehistoric Avengers. Before she was the host of the Phoenix, she was simply known as Firehair, named after her bright red hair, which left her abandoned by her parents only shortly after she was born into the world. Anyone who their tribe deemed basically different in some way was sacrificed in this manner. This was also to be the fate of Firehair, but she was rescued by wolves, so she ended up being okay. She grew up among her pack, but eventually joined up with the Tribe Without Fear, a group of prehistoric mutants. Her own mutant powers would manifest, and she would eventually lose her tribe and become bonded to the Phoenix Force. Ultimately resisting its dark temptations, she would go on to become one of the founding members of the Stone Age Avengers alongside Odin. While it was suggested that Lady Phoenix was actually the true mother of Thor, we learned in Avengers 1 million BC issue number 1 from 2022 that her relationship ended with Odin before Thor was born, with Gaia being Thor's natural mother as we knew before, Freya being Thor's adoptive mother, and Lady Phoenix being dubbed kinda like his bonus mother, after she helped Gaia give birth to Thor and saved him from a premature death. And then Gaia was like, you can be mother to Thor too. So we got that all figured out. Sorry what I said on part 1 is not exactly true. Not his mother, well she is his mother, but she's not his only mother. He's got a lot of mothers. Number 4. Artemis. Artemis was also once Wonder Woman, don't you know? Back in the New Earth continuity. She herself is an Amazon, and despite her youthful appearance, like most Amazons, she's pretty old. In fact, in the New Earth continuity, she was also granted eternal youth as the result of a spell that Circe had cast upon her. In the Prime Earth continuity, she is just straight up immortal. She hails from the Bana Migdal, which is a splinter group of Amazons all their own. Like I said, there are many different tribes. Princess Diana of Themyscira and Artemis have often been presented as rivals in the comics, with Artemis often being jealous of Wonder Woman and kind of striving to prove herself superior to Diana. But despite this, she is ultimately a force for good and a hero, though her warrior's heart might be a little harder in comparison maybe to Diana's when it comes to her heroic approach. Number 3. Red Sonja. Red Sonja is an interesting one to think of as old, considering how she is often portrayed in the comics, but like Conan, who I touched on during the part 1 of this list, Sonja herself is also ancient in the sense that she hails from the past, the Hyborian Age. She was a creation of Robert E. Howard's, who initially existed within Marvel, but eventually ended up being moved over to Dynamite when it comes to who owns the right to this fiery, fierce warrior character. The Hyborian Age was actually a pastime in Marvel history, at least that is what we're led to believe based on the fact that both she and Conan hail from the reality of Earth 616. Red Sonja set out on her path to become a fierce fighter at a young young age, after she was left orphaned when her family were killed and her people were attacked by a group of mercenaries. Red Sonja hails from Western Hyrcania and often fights to help those who cannot help themselves, even sometimes training those she comes across so that they might actually act as a hero in their own story. She is sometimes also a sword for hire, but generally only takes jobs that kind of fit with her own particular moral code. And she does have a moral code, even though she's a mercenary a lot of the times. Number 2. Shazam. Wait. Billy Batson is super old? No, we aren't talking about Shazam. No, not that Shazam. Not the Shazam formerly known as Captain Marvel. We're talking about the Wizard, who gave Billy Batson his powers and who has also been known by the name of Shazam. Initially in the Prime Earth continuity, we were led to believe that the Wizard was simply someone who bestowed powers on Billy, but we'd later learned that he was actually one of the old gods Shazam would actually get his powers from. This truth of the Wizard's, aka Mama Roggins, aka Shazam's origin would be revealed after Billy Batson was left depowered following the action of Grail, Darkseid's daughter, who basically cut off his access to his powers by untethering the old gods from his magic lightning. While not a direct superhero, the Wizard is a powerful force of good who was even able to help repower Billy from the afterworld in spirit form, finding basically new gods for him to be empowered by. Number 1. Eternal Warrior. Marvel and DC are not the only publishers who have ancient heroes. Even Dynamite, now owning Red Sonja, is not the only publisher with ancient superheroes by any stretch. A lot of people have ancient superheroes. In fact, one publisher that was suggested in the comments that has tons of ancient superheroes is Valiant Comics, so I'm happy to be talking to you about that. Great suggestion. This particular hero from Valiant that we're talking about is Gilad Anipada. Gilad was one of 4 siblings granted immortality. He has used this extended time over his life to train up, becoming a master in many different areas of combat. He acts as a hero in the comics, being tasked with defending the Geomancer of any given generation. Geomancers were kind of born in a line, and they're magical heroes in their own right who were chosen to act on behalf of the Earth as the planet's defender, and who are able to communicate with nature and the Earth. And the Eternal Warrior basically just acts as like their guardian, so heroes protecting heroes.
In its 10, Hercules. I think we all know the story of Hercules, whatever version you remember. The Disney animated movie, the DC version, the Roman or the Greek version, it's all generally the same thing. And I mean, even after that, this guy has a rap sheet of like 25 other heroic things he did, just like because he wanted to. A major factor in the well-known tragedies surrounding Hercules is the hatred that the goddess Hera, wife of Zeus, had for him. Because while there were many illegitimate offspring that Zeus, sired, let's say, Hercules was the son of an affair that Zeus had with a mortal woman. And not just any mortal woman, but a mortal that Zeus wanted so badly that he disguised himself as her husband in order to lay with her, and ordered Helios, the god of the sun, to not let the sun rise for 72 hours so that his one last night with her would last. Yeah, so not only is he the bastard of a mortal woman, he's also the product of a forced 3-day night, which I guess doesn't really bother anyone living in like Alaska or Norway, because the whole 6 months of night thing, not anything weird.
Number 9. Odin. Odin ended up joining the Stone Age Avengers sometime after he actually was said to have created the humans on Midgard, which was then known as Aesheim. In doing so, he had disappointed his father Bor, who decided to punish Odin by hurting the humans. Now, as someone who often seems pretty detached from human suffering later in his life, it's pretty wild to think that Odin possibly created them and was perhaps one of the first cosmic beings to actually care for them as a superhero. And I know what you're thinking, but Amanda, we all know Odin is super old. Yeah, you know that, but did you know he was this heroic? Because I always find it very surprising myself. Odin ended up returning to Aesheim to act as its protector and also to learn how to better control Mjolnir, which was his hammer at the time. He ended up befriending multiple prehistoric superheroes, joining the Avengers of 1 million BCE, and he also ended up developing a deeply romantic relationship with his teammate, the Lady Phoenix. In fact, it was even revealed that the Phoenix was actually the true mother of his son, Thor, because that's what's happening now, so there we go.
In at 8, Blue Beetle. In 1964, during the Silver Age of comics, Charlton Comics revised the character of Dan Garrett, the original Blue Beetle, for a new Blue Beetle series. Charlton's new Blue Beetle retained the original's name, but no powers or backstory, making him a different character. This Beetle was an archaeologist version of Dan, who obtained a number of superhuman powers, including super strength, flight, supervision, ability to generate energy blasts from a mythical scarab that he found during during a dig in Egypt, where it had been used to imprison an evil mummified pharaoh, because of course it was, which gave way for the DC Comics version of Jaime Reyes. DC's introduction of Jaime Reyes in 2006 retconned and expanded upon the Blue Beetle mythos, but given that the scarab was found during a dig in Egypt, where it was used as an attempt to overthrow Vandal Savage back in the 26th century BCE. Yeah, that's pretty ancient to me. Okay, I mean the scarab was created by Nabu, for God's sakes.
Number 7. Iron Fist. Fan Fei is the Iron Fist of the Stone Age Avengers, also known as the Avengers of 1 million BCE. Fan Fei is actually the reason why the ritual to become the Iron Fist and gain its unique powers was all about fighting Shao Lao in a battle to the death. This wasn't, however, because Kun Lun wanted to challenge Fan at the time and believed she should, be their champion. This actually happened as the result of a punishment. Fan Fei, you see, was a kung fu master who had been trained since birth in Kun Lun, but her curiosity of the outside world caused her to sort of leave Kun Lun in secret. She came across cavemen who were helpless against the beasts that basically often attacked them, and she decided she was going to help them. Fan sought to help these people by teaching and training them herself in the ways of kung fu. However, it was forbidden in Kun Lun to share your knowledge, and when her people found out, they marked her as a criminal. As punishment, her students were brought to Shao Lao and basically fed to the dragon. Forced to watch, Fan Fei went into a rage, breaking her shackles, seeking to share in the same demise as her students, becoming deeply distraught. However, when she went up against Shao Lao, she struck the dragon and her fist went right through, killing it, and coating her fist in its blood, giving her the power to channel her chi into fiery fists, and leaving her with a dragon mark, which marks her as the Iron Fist.
Number 6. Exodus. Grand Duke Benny du Paris was a 12th century nobleman from medieval France. Does that count as ancient? I don't know, anyone who was around then, so I'm taking it and just running with it, okay? Cool. What you gonna do about it? Nothing, because I'm just an image on your screen. As an adult, Bene was a crusader for the Knights Templar sent to Jerusalem during the Crusades, and he even became best friends with Eobar Garrington, the Black Knight of that era. The two had set out on a quest to find the Tower of Power, when his abilities manifested after an encounter with the Phoenix Force, which were then improved further thanks to the mutant apocalypse. But thanks to Big Blue, Exodus was trapped in a tomb until the modern day when he was awoken by Magneto and joined his cause. Exodus is one of the most powerful psionic mutants in existence, with such a pristine use of telekinesis and telepathy that he can even alter electrons and molecules. His power is so strong that Marvel even had to debuff him by making his powers dependent on his or others' level of faith in this mutant, although he still regularly kicks some serious butt.
Number 5. The Old Guard. Can we call the Old Guard heroes? I'm not really 100% sure on that. They are ancient warriors who've been many things over the years. Not all the things they've done were necessarily good, but I would say for the most part, they've tried to stay on the side of good, so I think I'm gonna count them for this list. And that's definitely where they are at when it comes to where we meet them in the modern day. Or at least, the direction they're headed towards, I would say. Initially, the Old Guard were a group of immortal mercenaries led by their oldest member, Andy, aka Andromaca of Scythia, who is thousands of years old. It is in their welcoming of a new member that we get to see some of the good in them, despite them being essentially expensive, deadly, and nearly indestructible guns for hire. Their immortality is as much a mystery to them as it is to readers of the series, seemingly happening to each member miraculously and really without explanation. One minute they were alive, the next dead, and then inexplicably right back to living. In 2020, the Old Guard comics got their first film adaptation through Netflix. As with most Greg Rucka creations, the premise and his approach had me hooked, pretty much.
Number 4. Medieval Spawn. Okay, I'm gonna come right out and say this, I know nothing about Spawn. I did not watch the show, I never read the comics, I really have no right to be standing here in front of you talking about him, but I'm doing it anyways. Don't worry, I'm not actually talking about the Spawn. I'm going to be talking about medieval Spawn. Naturally, medieval Spawn was not only a hell spawn, but also a knight living in 16th century England. And if you think about it, knights were almost like medieval superheroes, with tales and stories all their own. Sir John of York fought during a civil war in England, but was released from his service to Henry II after he and 3 others mistook the king's anger for orders and went and took the life of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Now, once he passed at the hands of his king's bodyguards, he was sent to hell for his crimes, where he made a deal with Malbolgia and returned as a hellspawn. He then went around England committing good deeds in the hopes of redeeming himself, but he continues to survive after being basically bonded to his armor and now possessing anyone who chooses to don his helmet. And I need to start reading Spawn. right now.
Number 3, Witchblade. While most people think of Sarah Pizzini when they think of the Witchblade, Sarah was not the only one to wield the blade, and was, in fact, by far the first. One of the oldest Witchblade wielders was actually Samantha. Samantha hails from ancient Roman times, though she herself is not Roman, but instead was a native of an old Celtic town that they overtook named Cecilia. At least I think its name was Cecilia. There's also a character in the story with her that's named Cecilia, so that's a little confusing, but I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. Samantha was enslaved, but would eventually escape and end up running into druids out in the countryside, who believed she was the one who would be destined to save the other Celts from the Romans. She was given the Witchblade and would set out on a mission to destroy all Romans. While a hero ultimately, I would say, at least of her own story, Samantha's tale and alignment is pretty complex, which is often what makes Witchblade hosts like her so interesting.
Number 2, Martian Manhunter. You know, I didn't actually know how old Martian Manhunter is. I knew that he was the last of his race of Martians, and I know that he is extremely powerful and should never be slept on. And I know that he speaks with the resolve and intelligence of someone who has seen some serious shiznit. But when I found out that according to DC, he is in the ballpark of around or over 220 million years old, I gotta say, I took a moment to just digest that. John Johns, or John Jones if you want to be rude and go by his human name, arrived on Earth after he was pulled there by a teleportation beam during an experiment conducted by Dr. Saul Erdel, who brought him through space and time and then passed away from the shock of actually finding a Martian. This is because John's race was practically wiped out a long time ago, leaving him completely alone and isolated. But now on Earth, with no one to tell him what the hell was going on, he eventually used his shapeshifting abilities to become a detective operating in Middletown, America. For a long time, he mainly operated from the safety of his human persona before he eventually exposed himself to the world and became a founding member of the Justice League, and also one of its most powerful members. Just saying.
Number 1, Ghost Rider. Way before Johnny Blaze was even ever born, there was Ghost. Ghost is the original Ghost Rider, or at least believed to be the original Ghost Rider, the initial spirit of vengeance. Retroactively anyways, as he made his first comic book appearance after Johnny Blaze historically, appearing in Marvel Legacy issue number 1 from 2017. So obviously that's pretty recent, but you know, canonically one of the first. Ghost became the first Ghost Rider during the prehistoric era and did so in order to defeat the mysterious Wendigo, who took over his pack, becoming their leader, only to eat the pack members save for Ghost. Ghost would stumble upon a snake and speak its real name in order to become Ghost Rider, the spirit of vengeance. He also has a cool mammoth, or he had a cool mammoth, and then he got another mammoth, and I think that mammoth's gone too, but he likes mammoths. He would go on to join up with the Avengers of 1 million BC.
Number 10, Medieval Spawn. Okay, I'm gonna come out right and say this. I know nothing about Spawn. I did not watch the show and I have never really read the comics. I really have no right to be standing here in front of you talking about him, but I'm doing it anyways. I'm gonna be talking about Medieval Spawn today. Naturally, Medieval Spawn was not only a hellspawn, but also a knight living in 16th century England. If you think about it, knights were almost like medieval superheroes with tales and stories all of their own. Sir John of York fought during a civil war in England, but was released from his service to Henry II after he and 3 other knights mistook the king's anger for orders and went and took the life of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Once the knight passed on to the afterlife at the hands of his king's bodyguards, he was sent to hell for his crimes, where he made a deal with Male Bolgia and returned as a hellspawn. He then went around England committing good deeds in the hopes of redeeming himself, but he continues to survive after being basically bonded to his armor and now possessing anyone who chooses to don his helmet. I should probably start reading Spawn, it actually sounds kinda cool.
At number 9 is E-Man. E-Man is a truly peculiar hero forged in the comic crucible who embodies the timeless allure of unconventional superheroes. Hailing from a bygone era of comic book legends, E-Man radiates an unmistakable charisma. Born out of pure energy, his cosmic odyssey spanned galaxies and eons, drawing knowledge from the very fabric of the universe. On Earth, he assumed the identity of Alectron, with his emblem being a subtle nod to Einstein's iconic equation. E-Man would later cross paths with Nova Kane, a dancer and scholar whose luminous presence matched his own, and together, they confronted cosmic perils with powers that defied the laws of physics. We're talking energy eruptions, form shifting, and unbridled imagination. Yet, Nova's abilities danced in harmony with their ever-evolving narrative. Now, despite the series' fleeting existence, might I say, E-Man remains renowned as one of the wittiest heroes in comic book history. Perhaps I'm not alone for my yearning for a reboot with an E-girl leading the way? Just me? Okay.
you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like and subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and maybe ringing that notification bell if you want. Number 8, Witchblade. The Witchblade is actually the offspring of the universe's primal forces, the Angelus or the light, and the darkness. To avert mutual destruction, a truce was struck between these two forces, and the Angelus and the darkness consummated, and in so doing, they conceived the Witchblade, creating peace and balance between them. Now, while most people think of Sarah Pizzini when they think of the Witchblade, Sarah was not the only one to wield the blade, and in fact was by far the first. One of the oldest Witchblade wielders was actually Samantha. Samantha hails from ancient Roman times, though she herself is not Roman, but instead was a native of an old Celtic town that they overtook named Sicilia. Samantha was captured but would eventually escape and end up running into druids out in the countryside who believed that she was the one who would be destined to save the other Celts from the Romans. She was given the Witchblade and would set out on a mission to destroy all Romans. Lovely. While a hero, I would definitely say that her morals are a bit more complex, which is what makes Witchblade hosts like her so interesting in the first place.
At number 7 is Naboo the Wise, recommended by Rodney Lindsay 849. Thank you very much for commenting this suggestion. Naboo the Wise is an ancient cosmic entity which arrived on Earth eons ago, aligning with the Lords of Order to combat universal chaos. His essence now resides in the Helmet of Fate, empowering those who take on the mantle of Dr. Fate. Which means that Dr. Fate's origins stretch over 10 billion years, rooted in the eternal struggle between the Lords of Order and Chaos. On the world of Celia, they were the first sentient beings, incarnations of magic. At around 3,500 years BCE, one lord, Naboo, descended to Earth advising Egyptian pharaohs. Naboo's powers forged potent artifacts like the Scarab of Khafre, hidden for millennia. His greatest creation, the Amulet of Anubis, became a sanctuary for the Lords of Order. During the Ramses' reign, Naboo served as a royal advisor and encountered the Spectre. He also harnessed nth metal from a crashed starship to create the Claw of Horus. Weakened, he entered into a millennia-long trance, awaiting his return to battle. At number 6 is E-Man, who was suggested by Paul Cooper 3611. Thank you very much. E-Man is a peculiar hero born from the cosmic crucible who exemplifies the enduring allure of unconventional superheroes. Created during a bygone era of comics, he pulsates with a distinct charm. You see, E-Man is born out of pure energy, and as E-Man traversed galaxies, absorbing wisdom from the cosmos, eventually he landed on Earth, where he embraced the guise of Alex Tron, with his insignia being a nod to Einstein's famed equation. In a twist of fate, E-Man met Nova Kane, a dancer and scholar, who'd soon join him as a radiant partner. Together they faced cosmic threats with powers that defied physics. Energy blast, shapeshifting, guys, the imagination was unbound here. Yet Nova's powers are ebbed and flowed, a testament to their ever-changing narrative. Their adventures weren't complete without Teddy Q, a koala with surprising intellect. Now, although this comic series was short-lived, E-Man has been touted as one of the funniest superheroes of all time. Am I the only one who wants a reboot, but this time with an E-girl at the helm? Just me? At number 5 is Mama Ragan, who was also recommended by Rodney Lindsay 849. Thanks again. In the realm of ancient superheroes, the Wizard, once a thunder god, stands as an unyielding figure. He joined the mystical circle of eternity, and as the Wizard, he punished Earth's transgressors. After Black Adam's devastation, he sought a successor, ultimately choosing Billy Batson. Despite Billy's obviously flawed nature, the Wizard saw potential and passed on his powers, creating Shazam, a force of super strength and flight. The Wizard's tale illustrates that even in the most ancient of times, new heroes can emerge from unexpected sources. At number 4 are the Eternals. The Eternals were forged by the enigmatic Celestials a million years ago, and they stand as ancient superheroes beyond the grasp of mortality. These extraordinary beings, often lurking in the shadows of humanity, exist to safeguard our very species. With powers beyond comprehension, their mysterious existence is marked by reincarnation, emerging anew after each demise. Following grueling civil wars, the Eternals chose a path of harmony and self-improvement, exemplified by their ability to converge into the formidable Unimind. This collective consciousness showcased their immense potential when united. Spanning epochs, they constructed magnificent cities, including Olympia, their current haven. A peculiar connection with the Olympian gods once saw them as Earth's divine representatives, forging an extraordinary alliance. Yet, turmoil always plagued them, eventually leading to madness and self-destruction. Now resurrected and slowly finding their way back to tranquility, these ancient superheroes persevere to this day. And number 3 is Martian Manhunter. The Martian Manhunter, also known as John Johns, is one of the last living members of the Martian race, and one of the oldest characters in DC Comics. His age is estimated to be north of 225 million years, an unimaginable span considering human lifespans. John Johns only made it to Earth recently thanks to a failed experiment, but he had been living in isolation on Mars for untold eons. A calamity about 1 million years ago wiped out nearly their entire civilization, leaving him as a solitary sentinel of his kind. His shape-shifting abilities, telepathy, and superhuman strength make him a formidable force, and his longevity adds to his aura of invincibility. At number 2 is Red Sonja. Originating as a supporting character in Conan Barbarian series, Red Sonja swiftly rose to prominence on account of her unwavering resolve and unmatched swordsmanship. With a tragic past as her backdrop, she swore vengeance and embarked on a relentless quest for justice. Marvel Comics chronicled her adventures until 1986, followed by Dynamite Entertainment's ongoing run. Red Sonja's story underwent transformations, notably in a 2013 reboot, emphasizing empowerment and skill development. Nevertheless, her iconic red hair and distinctive scale mail armor endure as her trademarks, showcasing her formidable presence. Red Sonja's indomitable spirit, exceptional sword skills, and enduring legacy solidify her position among ancient superheroes who are truly unstoppable, etching her name into the annals of legend. And at number 1 is Wonder Woman. Now, Wonder Woman's age is indeed a perplexing matter, much like the enigmatic depths of the multiverse itself. Within the vast tapestry of DC Comics, Diana's age appears to be in constant flux, as if she's a paradoxical embodiment of both youth and antiquity. Her lineage traces back to the mythical realm of Greek gods, suggesting a timeless existence. Yet some narratives attempt to reconcile her age with historical events, placing her birth amidst the ancient Amazonians in 12,000 BC. Now, the cinematic adaptation further complicates matters, proposing a staggering age of 5,000 years. In this kaleidoscope of diverging timelines, Wonder Woman becomes a symbol of agelessness.
A lot of people know the Phoenix Force, but not as many know about the Enigma Force. The Enigma Force is another source of cosmic power, but this one was basically crafted to be the opposite of the darkness in the cosmos, which was made manifest by the God of Darkness, the King in Black, ruler and god of all symbiotes. No. This entity is so old, it is believed to have come into existence around the same time as the universe, having been around since Null first also came into being. You might recognize this entity more as the hero Captain Universe from Marvel Comics, but even then, I feel like Captain Planet is still more easily recognizable than Captain Universe would be. When I say Captain, I mean, who first comes to your mind? For me, it's definitely Captain Planet, or maybe Captain America. Let me know your thoughts on that in the comments. The Enigma Force is somewhat different than the Phoenix Force in the sense that it typically takes hold of a host for a shorter period of time, instead choosing to merge with a being simply for the purpose of handling a single universal threat, and then usually leaving that host after the crisis has been averted. Up next, we're moving from the cosmic to the supernatural. iVampire is Andrew Bennett. Andrew Bennett hails from DC Comics, and he's considered obscure or niche enough that if you actually just Google his name, Andrew Bennett, without anything else in that search field, this man comes up instead of this man. Who is Andrew Bennett? He's not that other guy, I'll tell you that much. He is basically a vampire who is a superhero. If you're familiar with the Anne Rice Vampire Chronicles, the novels, you could think of him as a superhero version of Lestat, basically. That's kind of what he is. Sometimes he teams up with other heroes to take on threats, but he also has a lot of his own vampire politics to deal with most of the time. Life ain't easy being a vampire. Now, while some people aren't as maybe Googleable, Artemis is possibly the most well-known of these least well-known characters on our list. But at the same time, there are probably still a ton of folks out there who really only know Wonder Woman and maybe her mother Hippolyta when it comes to the Wonder Woman mythos and family, the Amazons. Artemis is not a family member per se, but she is one of the Amazons of Themyscira. For a while, she even took up the mantle of Wonder Woman herself. She's used that alias before. She's been a long-standing rival to Wonder Woman, and although she tends to have a more brutal approach that sometimes makes her more of an antagonist in stories, she currently is more of a hero or anti-hero at the time of this recording in the comics. The Darkness is something completely different. This character is not from either Marvel or DC Comics, but instead is from the pages of Top Cow. Top Cow Productions is Mark Silvestri's baby. It's an imprint of Image Comics. It has its own universe and its own line, with tons of newer and older comics in terms of the different series that it carries. There is A Man Among Ye and Sunstone, some of the newer stuff, and also Witchblade and Cyberforce, some of the older stuff. Like Cyberforce and Witchblade, The Darkness is also an older series and an older character, both in terms of comic book history and in terms of canon history. If you've heard of Witchblade, The Darkness is another character that very much is based in that world. The Darkness and Witchblade go together like peanut butter and jelly. Like the Witchblade, the Darkness is an entity that takes a host and is passed down through the generations. As such, it's supremely ancient, with its most well-known host in the comics being Jackie Estacado in the historical modern era. But if you want a really metal Darkness story, you can actually head all the way back to the days of ancient Rome or even the Vikings to see what the Darkness was up to in the comics. Because yeah, there was a Darkness at those times too. Darkness in general is pretty metal, I feel like. Zealot is another character that is more outside of the mainstream when it comes to comics, which is honestly where I like to go for lists like this. Never before seen being interpreted often for me as, you know, not one of the greatest superheroes of the big two. That is the big two publishers of DC Comics and Marvel, just so you know what I'm talking about when I say that. That being said, Zealot is technically from DC Comics at this point in time, but not originally. Originally, she actually hailed from the indie publisher known as Wildstorm. That was Jim Lee's comic publishing baby that he made when he got tired of larger publishers keeping all the rights for everything that their creatives had ever made for themselves. However, DC later would actually offer to buy Wildstorm, and Lee would agree. So now Wildstorm is a DC imprint and universe, so back into the big two it goes. And Jim Lee, of course, is pretty permanently back with DC Comics and has been for some time now. Zealot is an original member of Wildcats and is actually currently serving on the Birds of Prey team in the comics. Kind of fun. Zealot is Xana, an alien from the planet Kara who has lived for thousands of years, so she really old. She ancient. Not all mutants are from the modern day. Take a look at this next hero. Exodus is a super old mutant from Marvel Comics. For most of his life, he was in a stasis, so that's probably why you didn't see him around throughout all of history. Initially, Exodus was more of a villain in the comics, at least somewhat, and I'm sure he'll go back to being a villain at some point again. But during the Krakoan period of X-Men, there haven't actually been a ton of true mutant villains. This is because all the mutants decided to band together as one nation, working together for the greater good of mutant kind, all part of Krakoa or Arakko, as opposed to fighting against one another. So, save for a few, most mutants, even the ones that are villainous normally, have been acting as heroes. If you're wondering how old Exodus is, he was around during the 12th century and actually fought in the Crusades, being known then as the noble Grand Duke Benet du Paris. During his travels, he ran into Apocalypse and was chosen to become his champion. And even back then, Exodus had kind of a sense of heroic valiance about him. When Apocalypse attempted to pit Exodus against his friend, another ancient Marvel hero, the Black Knight, you may have heard of him, Exodus refused to fight him and instead turned on Apocalypse.
At number 7 is the Eternal Warrior. Valiant Comics introduces us to Gilad Anipara, the Eternal Warrior. Unlike typical caped crusaders, Gilad's tale is one of immortality and ceaseless dedication. Bestowed with eternal life, Gilad has honed his skills over millennia. He's become a master of combat, wielding centuries of experience as his weapon. But his role goes beyond mere physical prowess. See, Gilad's mission is to safeguard the Geomancer, a mystical guardian chosen by the Earth itself. Geomancers are not your everyday heroes. They're in tune with our very planet, with the power to commune with nature.
Number 6. Ogon Bat. Okay, Ogon Bat is a unique and pretty cool character in his own right, but what makes him even cooler is that he was actually one of the world's first ever superheroes ever, even technically coming before Superman. Originating from Japan as the god of justice and protector of the weak, his origin is that he was originally an Atlantean who was sent forward in time 10,000 years to defend the modern world from evil. He wields a scepter that fires bolts of energy, causes many earthquakes, and slices through steel. He himself was immortal, could fly, breathe underwater, had X-ray vision, and possessed superhuman strength, speed, and invulnerability to bullets and lasers. He was summoned by a little girl who would call on him, causing a sparkle to appear around, which then turned into a bat, and then turned into the hero when it found its enemy. While he initially started as a comic, he also has a TV show that appeared in several different countries around the world. And I think he looks really cool.
Number 5 is Arion. Arion is a figure often overshadowed by the more celebrated heroes of our time. Born to the cosmic forces of good and strife, Arion emerged as a lord of order, a manifestation of righteousness incarnate. His twin brother, Garn Danuth, embodied chaos, setting the stage for an eternal struggle between order and disorder. But it was Arion who shone the brightest in the annals of Atlantis, a prominent sorcerer king and scientist, a true polymath of his era. He stood as a beacon of hope, a paragon of virtue, and the very first hero of Atlantis. Yet beyond Atlantis, his legacy extends to the Amazons, etching his name into the tapestry of time as a hero unparalleled in ancient lore.
Number 4, Anthro. Created by Howard Post, Anthro is considered the first boy on Earth, existing in prehistoric times. He lived with his family during a period when the world was still in its primal stages. Anthro's curiosity and adaptability drove him to explore the challenges and mysteries of a world populated by both primitive creatures and nascent human tribes. Through his adventures, Anthro unwittingly played a significant role in shaping humanity's development and survival, often making use of his ingenuity and courage to overcome obstacles, while also being part of some modern-day stories thanks to time travel. He has popped up in Crisis on Infinite Earths, Armageddon 2001, Zero Hour, Team 13, and even Final Crisis, and even been to the Marvel Universe where he interacted with Devil Dinosaur. Anthro's narrative explores the struggle for survival, the emergence of intelligence, and the foundations of human civilization itself. His story reflects the essence of human curiosity, resilience, and the quest for progress, serving as a symbol of humanity's earliest steps into the unknown. His powers are, well, pretty much non-existent. He doesn't really have any. He's just a person who's really smart and creative. But he has played a part in some big events and in more than just a background kind of way.
At number 3 is Gilgamesh. Now, the legend of Gilgamesh, a name echoing through the annals of time, transcending the boundaries of myth and history as the king of Uruk, a city-state nestled in the cradle of Mesopotamia. His story, carved into the very clay tablets of ancient Sumer, is a testament to human ambition and the quest for immortality. But what if I were to tell you that Gilgamesh's legacy may have transcended mere mortals? Enter the Forgotten One, a mysterious figure shrouded in the myths of time. A wanderer, a warrior, he bore the mantle of Gilgamesh, among many others, including Hercules, as if plucking stories from the pages of mythology itself. The Forgotten One, aka Gilgamesh's exile from the Eternals, his kingdom in Olympus, and his ultimate call to battle against the deviants bear a striking resemblance to the epic journey of Gilgamesh. Is it a mere coincidence, or could there be a deeper connection between these timeless narratives? The mysteries of the past continue to unravel, revealing the intricate tapestry of human history and its intersections with the world of myth and legend.
Number 2, Etrigan. Etrigan the demon was the firstborn of Belial, who was such a handful that Belial exiled Etrigan's mother to Masak Mabdil and told his son that his antics drove her away. That's rough. His antics ended up even driving Belial out of hell for several decades, returning with another son born of a mortal witch named Merlin. Etrigan was originally summoned to Earth to serve Merlin in a desperate final attempt to protect Camelot from the evil witch Morgana Le Fay. Merlin bound the demon to a mortal peasant named Jason, while Merlin went into hiding to rest, and these two lived a very long and brutal life together throughout history. Basically, how it would go is that Etrigan incited war and strife, and in return, Jason gained wealth and status. Not a horrible idea for some people. Despite sharing the same body though, the demon and his host are usually at odds with each other, and Jason Blood retains a lot of guilt based on Etrigan's demonic actions, which I think played a part in him being a bit more heroic, or as heroic as a demon can be, I guess.
And at number 1 is Beowulf, a legendary Gadish king who truly embodies an ancient superhero who defies the test of time. His 50-year reign was marked by epic battles, but it was the confrontation with the dragon guarding the Holy Grail's secrets that ultimately sealed his fate. Intriguingly, James Allison, a character with the ability to recall past incarnations, speculated that these heroic exploits might be embedded in our collective memory, hinting at a deeper connection between myth and reality. If you're wondering who that dude is, it's just some guy who can see past lives, no big deal. Anyways, Marvel Comics added a unique twist to Beowulf's tale, suggesting that he survived his dragon battle and re-emerged as an immortal warrior in the modern age. This reincarnated hero engaged in friendly rivalries with figures like Theseus and joined forces with Hercules to confront new gods. Beowulf's timeless narrative serves as a testament to the enduring appeal of ancient superheroes, reminding us that their legends continue to captivate, transcending generations and even reality itself.
Number 10, Namor. While many folks think of Namor as being an anti-hero, and honestly he most definitely is, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe he's only really been presented to us as like a straight up villain. Albeit a straight up villain with a pretty powerful and universally relatable motive, I would say. He does what he does in an effort to protect his people and to defend the oceans from those who would pollute and destroy them. AKA, that's us. I think we can all get behind that message. I know I can, as someone that, doesn't want our oceans to bubble and boil and just be filled with garbage. However, Namor's methods honestly could use some work from a heroic standpoint. Namor is presented as being both brutal and cruel when it comes to his actions, which makes him a villain in the MCU. While he is around 100 years old in the comics at this point, his live action adaptation was made considerably older and is estimated based on his origin to actually be around 500 years old. Woo!
Number 9, Black Adam. Another anti-hero? I promise this won't be a common occurrence. There are two main different origin stories for Black Adam. In the pre-New 52 era of DC, circa 1200 BC, the wizard Shazam became a high priest to the pharaoh Ramses II of Egypt. This is where he met the young prince Teth Adam of Kahndaq, Ramses' son. There we go. Teth Adam impressed the wizard with his fairness and decency, and boom, he was granted the power. But in the more recent continuity, Teth Adam was born in Egypt in the 26th century BCE along the banks of the Nile as part of the Kahndaqi tribe, and it did not take long for him to be forced into a life of unwilling servitude. Very different. His entire family lost their lives except for his nephew Aman. Aman would save Teth Adam's life, which got him the recognition of the wizard Shazam, who turned Aman into his champion. Aman then shared this power with his uncle Teth Adam, but not seeing eye to eye on how to use the power, Black Adam took his own nephew off of the board and stole the power for himself. This was before he was either banished, stuck in a scarab, or locked away in a tomb, depending on which era you want to talk about. But no matter when we are talking about, Black Adam has been a threat to everyone, and he took on almost the entire world when his family was taken from him back in DC's World War III.
Number 8, Rotath of Lemuria. Rotath of Lemuria is a common example of how magic was presented, often in stories that take place in the Hyborian Age, especially in regards to Conan's story there. He made his first appearance in issue number 37 of Conan the Barbarian from the 1970s, when almost everyone who read comics or otherwise was into the sword and sorcery genre. In this same issue, Rotath was killed by Kull after he was hired by the king of Lemuria, who was frightened of Rotath's power. As he died, Rotath cursed both the king and Kull, casting a spell so that he might return, and so he did. This time in a golden body, but still he ended up being defeated here. This time not by Kull directly, but instead by, well, a giant slug after fighting against Conan and Juma. This is a true story, by the way. Man, I hate when I get defeated by giant slugs.
Slugs, man, they get
Slugs.
you. It's funny because all you need is like a little bit of table salt.
Yes.
Take that sucker off the board.
Back again to the Wonder Woman mythos. Nubia is another character that is not well known from that, I would say, group of heroes. And what's even more surprising to me is that I actually thought Artemis might be lesser known than Nubia, but it turns out that Artemis is likely even more well known, considering that she's actually made overall more comic book appearances. Whereas Nubia, despite being a literal, sometimes sister to Wonder Woman, depending on her origin story, and more recently Queen queen of the Amazons has not appeared as often, which surprises me, but here we are. Nubia, like Wonder Woman and Artemis, is also considered to be ancient. Her current origin in the Prime Earth continuity had her as an ancient princess who was actually reborn from the Well of Souls after her death, becoming the Amazonian warrior Nubia. Nubia was the last to actually be born from the Well of Souls and was born around the same time as Diana in the current main continuity. So in that version of the story, they grow up together and that kind of gives them that sisterly bond. The next one might surprise a lot of folks out there. Who is Angela? Well, although she originated in the pages of Image's Spawn, she is actually now Thor's long-lost sister. Wait, what? Okay, so here's the story. Angela was initially a Hellspawn hunter from the pages of Spawn comics. While Spawn technically gets his powers from Hell, Angela kind of works on behalf of Heaven in the war against Heaven and Hell, so that's kind of how that goes, and as such, she therefore hunts down people like Spawn. Hellspawn, that is. She was created by Neil Gaiman and Todd McFarlane, but there was an issue with that. The issue of who really owned this character, who had those creating rights. While Gaiman had made her for Spawn while working for Todd, McFarlane later claimed to own the rights solely to her character, and that's where things got rough between these two. The two entered a legal battle with Gaiman fighting to prove that he actually also had rights to Angela as a co-creator. The court sided with him, and money also had to be determined for how much Gaiman was owed based on how much money had been made by the use of this character that he co-created. During this time, Gaiman decided to bring Angela over to Marvel and even wrote 1602 for Marvel Comics just to help cover his legal costs. He actually dedicated 1602 to Todd, and I quote, for making it necessary. Angela, when she came over to Marvel, ended up after 1602 being incorporated into the main continuity, where she became the long-lost angelic sister of the god and superhero Thor. Up next, Shining Knight is a hero I didn't even know about before writing this this video for you guys. I love when I learn something new and then I get to share it with you all, whether that's something I've read or something I found through my own research. It honestly feels really special to me to share stuff like that with you. Shining Knight is basically like what would happen if Captain America was a medieval knight instead of like a World War II super soldier war hero. Shining Knight hails from DC Comics though, he's not from Marvel, just to be clear. He was initially a hero in the 6th century who was frozen for centuries before emerging once more in what we'd consider to be Captain America's original era actually, the 1940s. During his time as a hero in the 1940s, he was known as a member of the All-Star Squadron and the 7 Soldiers of Victory. So yeah, like I said, basically Captain America, but like what if he was a medieval knight? I love it. Finally, we have Agamotto. For those who are unfamiliar, Agamotto is the Sorcerer Supreme, or he was a Sorcerer Supreme, anyways. While he has acted as an antagonist to the current Sorcerer Supreme Stephen Strange in the past, initially Agamotto himself was a protector of Earth and a hero, way back in the past. He even served on the Avengers, or rather, the prehistoric Avengers that is, the Avengers of 1 million BCE. Number 10, Anti-Monitor. Anti-Monitor is a supremely powerful villain who threatened the very existence of the multiverse during the events of Crisis on Infinite Earths. He controls the antimatter universe, and his very existence is deeply tied to the destruction of all things. So much so that even after the Anti-Monitor was defeated, Necron ended up trapping the Anti-Monitor's body. It was later revealed in Blackest Night that Necron had basically been using Anti-Monitor's corpse as a source of power for the Black Central Power Battery. So yeah, even in death he's scary. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please be sure to show us that you love us by clicking that like button and coming back. Come on back. Number 9, Rotath of Lemuria. Rotath of Lemuria is a prominent figure in the stories from the Hyborian Age. Rotath made his debut in Conan the Barbarian issue number 37, which was published in the 70s during the peak, I would say, of the sword and sorcery genre. The king of Lemuria was scared of Rotath's power, understandably so, as many magic users back in those days of these comics tended to be pretty evil, which Rotath also was. So he hired Kull to defeat and kill him. However, as he was dying, Rotath cursed both the king and Kull and cast a spell so that he could return. He didn't just return too, he came back with a gold body. Number 8, Grail. Grail was born on the same day as Wonder Woman, who is believed to be a few millennia old based on Amazon history, and considering when the Amazons left man's world and how long after that Diana was brought into their world as Hippolyta's daughter, though that still means that she's likely considerably younger than her father, who is also super old. Grail, the daughter of Amazon assassin Myrna and Darkseid, is the offspring of one of the most feared villains of the DC universe. That's right, we're talking about Darkseid. Darkseid is known for being a powerful adversary to all major superheroes, I'd say, but especially the Justice League. He's a master strategist, he's incredibly strong and durable, and additionally he of course has his Omega beams that he can use to destroy his enemies, or I guess displace them through time.
Alright, number 7, Yuga Khan. Yuga Khan is the first ever tyrannical ruler of the planet of Apocalypse, and the father of both Drax, who would become the Infinity Man, and Uxas, who would become Darkseid. Given his nature as essentially a god and one that fathered the current gods, quote unquote, Yuga Khan is certainly ancient, being essentially immortal. As an example, before the fourth world is even fully formed, Yuga Khan alongside his wife Hegra and their sons ruled Apocalypse, creating one of the most feared empires in the entire universe. But being such an astronomically powerful being, it wasn't enough. Yuga Khan was obsessed with becoming the most powerful being in the universe and wanted to be able to essentially control it all. But he was also obsessed with finding out the reason for why it all existed in the first place. So he's a conqueror, but also a philosopher, which is nice. This obsession is what brought him to the Source Wall, getting trapped in it while trying to unravel the mysteries of the Source. All the inhabitants of New Genesis are way stronger, faster, and smarter than humans, being almost all on a level akin to Superman, while also being immortal, but Yuga Khan, he is the most powerful of them all. So much so that after an absolutely colossal effort, Yuga Khan was even able to break free of the Source Wall. That act released energies that could be felt throughout the galaxy and caused the universe itself to shake. He then replenished his power by absorbing the entire life force of the planet Velos and all its inhabitants, and then did the same thing with millions of other worlds while on his way back to Apocalypse. His return to Apocalypse made everyone tremble, including its current ruler, his own son, Darkseid, who he imprisoned in the core of the planet. Most recently though, Yuga Khan was one of the beings empowering Shazam during Darkseid War.
Mine are so Conan. I went really Conan with this list.
I respect that though.
I mean, there's lots of old guys, cause
Mine are all like spacey.
yeah, it's so true though. Space is old. Number 6, Kulan Gath. Kulan Gath is probably one of the most iconic villains that Conan the Barbarian has had in the comics. He is so old, in fact, that he also became the enemy of another ancient villain known as the Mutant External, more specifically, Selene. Not to be confused with the Eternals, who are their own thing entirely. These are the Externals, not the Eternals. Kulan Gath made his first full feature appearance back in 1972 in the comics in Conan the Barbarian issue number 15.
Number 5, Uranos. Okay, technically this guy actually appeared in What If number 24 in September of 1980, but he didn't really do much, and was never really mentioned until very recently. Uranos the Undying is an Eternal, and one of the deadliest beings in the Marvel Universe. Uranos, like every Eternal, was created by the Celestials 1 million years ago, but he believed the Eternals best fulfilled their purpose if they exterminated both the Deviants and humans, all life outside the universe, and imprisoned the Celestials. Luckily, his brothers Kronos and Oceanus disagreed, plunging the Eternals into a civil war. Ultimately, Uranos lost that war and was captured by his brothers and became the first Eternal to be imprisoned within the Exclusion, where he stayed for over 500,000 years because of the failsafe he imposed upon the machine. That failsafe being that if he dies, his greatest celestial designed weapons will be unleashed on the world. Recently, mutants have been revealed to be related to Deviants, making the X-Men enemies to the Eternals, and the Eternal Druid called on Uranus for help in Axe Judgment Day number 1. And he definitely did help. As in a matter of 20 minutes, Uranos eradicated Cable, Magneto, and David Haller, otherwise known as Legion, along with a bunch of other powerful Omega level mutants. Number 4, Yuga Khan. Yuga Khan is the first ever tyrannical ruler of the planet of Apocalypse, and the father of both Drax, who would become the Infinity Man, and Uxas, who would become Darkseid. Given his nature as essentially a god and one that fathered the current gods, Yuga Khan is certainly ancient, being essentially immortal. As an example, before the fourth world is even fully formed, Yuga Khan alongside his wife, Hegra, and their sons ruled Apocalypse, creating one of the most feared empires in the entire universe. But being such an astronomically powerful being, it wasn't enough for him. Yuga Khan was obsessed with becoming the most powerful being in the universe and wanted to be able to essentially control it all. But he was also obsessed with finding out the reason for why it all exists. So he's a conqueror, sure, but he's also a philosopher, which is nice. This obsession is what brought him to the Source Wall, getting trapped in it while trying to unravel the mysteries of the Source. All the inhabitants of New Genesis are way stronger, faster, and smarter than humans, being almost all on a level akin to Superman, while also being immortal. But Yuga Khan, he is the most powerful of them all. So much so that after an absolutely colossal effort, Yuga Khan was even able to break free of the Source Wall. That act released energies that could be felt throughout the galaxy and caused the universe itself to shake. I don't even know how that works. He then replenished his power by absorbing the entire life force of the planet Velos and all its inhabitants, and then did the same thing for millions of other worlds while on his way to Apocalypse. His return to Apocalypse made everyone tremble, including its current ruler, his son Darkseid, who he imprisoned in the core of the planet. Most recently though, Yuga Khan was one of the beings empowering Shazam during Darkseid War. Number 3. Kulan Gath. Kulan Gath was a sorcerer who lived in Earth's Hyborian era, aka the time of Conan the Barbarian. So yes, he is incredibly ancient. He actually isn't the original Kulan Gath though. Well, he is, and he isn't. You see, Kulan Gath had a slave who poisoned him and assumed his identity. When this Kulan Gath sought out the training of the then Sorcerer Supreme, Mekri Ra, he was refused. He responded by taking the life of and consuming the Sorcerer Supreme, gaining his power. As an enemy of Conan the Barbarian, Kulan was eventually beheaded by the Barbarian, but not before he had become immortal by putting his essence into a magical amulet. So yes, he pulled a Voldemort and made a Horcrux. After the amulet had made its way to Manhattan in the modern era, it ended up in the hands of a mugger, who donned the amulet, allowing Kulan Gath to possess and transform the body of the mugger. Then, he transformed Manhattan into a replica of the time he came from, manipulated the minds of everyone there, and took control of the minds of the Avengers, X-Men, New Mutants, and Morlocks to hunt down Spider-Man. It took the combined powers of Doctor Strange and the mutant magic to change time so that the mugger was killed by Nimrod instead and never possessed by Gath. You know you're a problem when people just go back in time to make sure that you never get back. Number 2, the Great Darkness. So great. You can't get much more ancient than existing before creation. The Great Darkness was the literal darkness and nothingness that existed before the Presence ever came to be. When the Presence, aka God, said, "Let there be light," the Great Darkness is the one who went into hiding. At some point, a clan known as the Brujeria, which is, I think I said that right, attempted a ritual to reawaken the Great Darkness in order to destroy God and reshape the universe. Instead of being completely evil though, it was more like an animal who was confused and didn't understand its power or what its purpose even was. The Great Darkness, also sometimes referred to as the Great Evil Beast, went on a warpath, easily defeating many heroes and waging a solo assault on heaven itself, decimating everything in its way to demand answers from the Presence. It even caused the 3 main figures of hell to form a union with each other just in case it decided to attack them, which it didn't. When the Great Darkness reached heaven though, it met Swamp Thing, of all people, who taught it the concept of good and evil, explaining that one couldn't survive without the other. The darkness then reached up and God reached back and they became one and the same as yin and yang, or as a balance, that kind of thing. Recently though, the Great Darkness played a large role in the Dark Crisis event. It's basically the overarching villain of the entire DC multiverse, but also, it's kinda just a force of nature. Sort of. Number 1, the Black Winter. You know, Galactus almost made this list, but why choose him when you can choose the bigger, more dangerous, and surprisingly not well-known pappy of Galactus? Where Galactus consumes individual planets, the Black Winter devours entire realities. The Black Winter, also known as the Star Plague, the Blight Storm, the Rot Blizzard, or the Thimble Winter, was the one who brought the end to the 6th iteration of the cosmos, leaving only Galen of the planet Ta, the one who becomes Galactus, alive. The Black Winter essentially made Galen his herald, so when the Black Winter arrives in the Marvel Universe in the latest run of Thor, Galactus turns an All-Father Thor, who possessed the Thor Force, into his Herald of Thunder, granting him the power cosmic, and an attack from this Thor only stops the Black Winter for a total of 14 seconds. That's nuts! That's how powerful this multiversal entity is. But Luckily, at this time, the Black Winter isn't here to destroy the universe. He's just here for his herald, Galactus. But still, Thor turns Galactus into a massive power cosmic explosion that destroys the Black Winter completely, and it's incredibly awesome. Kicking off the list today at number 10 is Conan the Barbarian. Conan was born on a carnage-strewn battlefield in the hills of the westernmost region of Chimeria, all the way back in the Hyborian Age, aka around 13 to 10,000 BC. The fact that Conan was born on a battlefield was considered to be an omen that Conan would grow up to be a great warrior one day, and that was not wrong. He was one of the most accomplished swordsmen of the Hyborian Age and is often listed alongside King Arthur, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Zorro as one of the greatest fictional male sword fighters in history, which is a really cool thing to put on a resume. Conan has unusual strength, agility, and speed for a human being. He has lifted immense objects or enemies, even breaking the neck of a raging bull when he was still pretty young. It is said that he has the strength equivalent of about 10 to 20 men, but he has been knocked over by just 2 dudes before, so don't take that as a fact. More often than not, Conan relies upon his lightning-fast reflexes in combat situations, and they very rarely let him down. On top of that, he has a massive level of durability, and through years of dealing with sorcerers, magicians, and witches, he has even developed a moderate level of resistance to magic and mind control spells. Conan is a master warrior. He has a hardy survival instinct, is a master of stealth, and is multilingual. While primarily known as a wandering sellsword, Conan progressively became a master tactician, leading entire armies into battle, and eventually, Conan even became the king of Aquilonia, and also eventually a hero interacting with the heroes of the modern day. In at number 9, it's Red Sonja. If we are talking about Conan the Barbarian, then we need to talk about Red Sonja, because not only is she from the same time period, she's arguably even more capable than Mr. Barbarian himself. Red Sonja lived with her family in a humble home in the western Hyrcanian steppes. I don't know if I pronounced that right, so let me know in the comments down below. When she had just turned 17 years old, a group of mercenaries attacked, taking the lives of her father, Ivor, her mother, and her 2 younger brothers, and burning their house and all their possessions to the ground. Now she survived, but was then horribly mistreated by the leader of that group. Understandably, Sonja raged for some revenge. Answering this, the red goddess Skatok appeared to her and instilled incredible skill in the handling of swords and other weapons under the condition that she would never lay with a man unless he defeated her in combat, which is a weird kind of thing to say, I guess. Going forward as Red Sonja, she honed her skills with the blade and became a sellsword, eventually even slaying the evil wizard Kulan Gath, but he came back. Red Sonja was one of the most powerful and skilled swordsmen in any era, among both men and women. She was also in peak human physical condition, a martial arts expert, and possessed knowledge and experience in fighting the supernatural. And she beat Conan. So, number 8, Hercules. Hercules is the son of Zeus, Skyfather and supreme ruler of the gods of Olympus, and Alcmena, a mortal woman who lived over 3,000 years ago. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, arranged for her father Zeus to have a half-mortal son to be the world's champion. Zeus seduced the mortal queen Alcmena, pretending to be her husband, King Amphitryon. I'm sorry if I pronounced that too. Alcmena gave birth to the baby Hercules, and as an adult demigod in ancient Greece, Hercules achieved worldwide fame as he became the greatest hero of the ancient world, best known for his 12 labors. As the Olympian god of strength as well, Hercules' strength is unlimited, making him one of the strongest and most powerful heroes in the Marvel Universe. As an infant, he was breastfed by his stepmother, Hera, queen of the Olympian gods, which increased his already demigod physiology to godlike levels. Hercules possessed the superhuman physical attributes of an Olympian god, but interestingly, some of his powers are actually superior to the vast majority of the other gods. Most recently, he has been a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but he has also been part of the Avengers, the God Squad, Council of Godheads, the Mighty Avengers, the Secret Avengers, the Defenders, the Heroes for Hire, and, of course, S.H.I.E.L.D. Coming in at number 7 today is Dream. The Endless, featured in DC's Sandman story, are a group of 7 siblings: death, destiny, despair, desire, delirium, destruction, and the focus of our point today, Dream. These siblings represent fundamental aspects and forces of the Vertigo/DC universe, and are all immortal, ageless, and pretty much nigh omnipotent. The parents of the Endless were revealed to be Time, the embodiment of all time itself, father of the Endless, and Night, the embodiment of the infinite darkness that existed before the dawn of the universe, and mother of the Endless. So it's safe to say that these beings are probably pretty ancient, like 10 billion years old ancient. As for Dream himself, or Morpheus, he isn't so much a superhero as we are used to, but he is an extremely powerful, reluctant hero is what I would say, and his journey to that status from emotionless god to a being displaying very human-like emotions and characteristics is the fundamental story of the Sandman itself. Dream dwells in a realm called the Dreaming, from where he controls the fundamental concept of fantasy and reality in the universe, as the line between the waking world and the dream world is quite thin.
Number 6. Barbatos. Barbatos is the Bat God who basically helped Batman to become what he is today, but as part of his own dark machinations. At least, Barbatos claims to be that. According to Barbatos, he was the bat that appeared before Bruce the night that he decided to become Batman, inspiring the young Bruce Wayne to go on to don the cape and cowl, and becoming a major symbol for Batman. Barbatos was once the loyal ally of the World Forger. He was a dragon who would destroy worlds that were unstable, often built on fear, known as belonging to the Forge of Worlds. Barbatos, however, grew to enjoy destroying worlds so much that he actually decided to rebel against the World Forger so he could destroy more worlds, ultimately destroying his master, which allowed him to corrupt his Forge of Worlds, with it warping and ultimately becoming known by a name you might be more familiar with, the Dark Multiverse. Just as the World Forger is one of the oldest beings in the cosmos over at DC, so is his pet dragon gone rogue, Barbatos. Barbatos would go on to recruit others to his new purpose to destroy the main multiverse. Number 5. Morlun and the Inheritors. Morlun and the Inheritors sounds like the name of a band. A band of vampires? Not a thing. A coven of vampires, really, I guess I should say. And no, I don't believe they play musical instruments and or perform in any kind of musical acts, sadly. Morlun and the Inheritors are a threat that we meet as we go into the Spider-Verse. They were the main antagonists of the Spider-Verse event in the comics, which promised to feature all the alternate Spider-Men, women, and folks that had ever featured. And they were also the main antagonists of the follow-up event, Spider-Geddon. The Inheritors are basically energy vampires that feed specifically on what is known as totemic life energy. What is that? What is a totem? It is usually a superpowered or somewhat unique individual who represents some kind of powerful animal instinct or arachnid avatar, like spiders! Morlun specifically is well known for being a main villain of Spider-Man's, and while he's not as prominently featured as, some of other Spidey's villains, he is still particularly powerful. We don't really know, I don't think, how old the Inheritors or Morlun are, at least not in their first life, but we do know they're pretty old, having participated in fights in the multiverse seemingly a long time ago. Also, they'd like to dress up super Victorian, so they gotta at least be from that era or beyond, although they're not necessarily Earth-based villains, they're multiversal villains. Number 4. Sin. Sin might be one that people are a little bit more familiar with in another form, but also there might be a lot of you out there who aren't, as this villain hails from the Spawn comics. If you are up to date with your Spawn reading, then you know who I'm talking about here, but for those of you who aren't up to date or maybe have never read Spawn, this villain was actually formerly known as a longtime ally of Al Simmons' Spawn, his mentor in a way, Cogliostro. While initially just seeming like a well-meaning fellow Hellspawn, seeking to teach Al the ropes and also help to guide him away from being fully used as a pawn of hell, Cogliostro is actually later revealed to be more ancient than we might have otherwise thought, in fact also being known by another name even before he was known as Cog. Cain. Yeah, the Cain, the man from biblical myth who killed his brother and was condemned for it, Cain of Cain and Abel. After revealing that he was really only helping Spawn to serve his own interests and becoming a villain, Cog was redeemed once more for a short little while before becoming a villain again, who has the ability to drain the power of other Hellspawns, being known now as Sin. Sin with 2 N's. Number 3. Ramatut. While we all know Kang the Conqueror now, thanks to him being featured in the MCU in Quantumania, and the hype for his inclusion in that film being very real, I would say at this point, not everyone is as familiar with the other versions of Nathaniel Richards from Earth 6311. Despite the fact that this is a villain from the future, Kang actually has existed across time in many different forms, adopting the form even of an ancient pharaoh. This was back when Kang was a ruler in ancient Egypt, before he was really even Kang. Nathaniel Richards became obsessed with the reality of Earth 616 and would eventually construct a time machine shaped like a sphinx and use it to travel back in time to around 2960 BC. Having brought with him a robotic army and advanced futuristic weapons, it wasn't long before Nathaniel was the ruler of Egypt, taking the name of Ramatut. This version of Nathaniel also became focused and obsessed on the creation of En-Saba-Nur, who, as Ramatut knew, was destined to become the world's first mutant. Number 2. Perpetua. Perpetua is one of those characters who is super powerful and who tons of people should know about, really, just for that reason alone, I would say. But no. Instead, most folks know more about the Anti-Monitor, Perpetua's son, than they do about her. Granted, this could be because she's simply a newer character, and in that case, I mean, fair enough. She's a newer character, but she's also really old because she's kind of like a retcon character. Perpetua is known for being the first one to create the multiverse, or at least, one of the first people, depending on how you like to reconcile DC lore, because I feel like Perpetua isn't the first one that we've said that about. While Anti-Monitor is the character most well known for causing the Crisis on Infinite Earths, it's later revealed that Perpetua was the one truly pulling his strings, and therefore responsible for this crisis. In fact, Perpetua feeds off Crisis energy, and is said to have been responsible for all crises we've seen. At least all crises we've seen before Dark Crisis, likely, since I think she was dead when that one actually took place, so, or at least defeated. Is she still alive? I don't think so. Number 1. Rotath of Lemuria. Heading back to the Hyborian Age once again on one of our ancient lists, which, by the way, if you want to visit the Hyborian Age again and again, you should check out part 1 and part 2 of our ancient superheroes list. We got you. Rotath of Lemuria is a common example of how magic was presented often in stories from the Hyborian Age, especially in regards to Conan's story there. Rotath made his first appearance in issue number 37 of Conan the Barbarian from the 70s, when everyone was into the sword and sorcery genre. In this same issue, Rotath was killed by Kull after he was hired by the king of Lemuria, who was frightened of Rotath's power. As he died though, Rotath cursed both the king and Kull, casting a spell so that he might return. And so he did, this time in a golden body, but still he ended up being defeated, this time not by Kull directly, but instead, of course, after fighting Conan and Juma, and also being defeated by a giant slug, which that part is a little random, but hey, I'll take it.